"Get off him! Hands behind your back! Now! On the ground!" The officer's weapon was already drawn. Red and blue light strobed across the sidewalk, painting the concrete in alternating flashes that turned every shadow into a threat. The woman kneeling on the pavement looked up, not startled, not confused, but with the measured stillness of someone who had been expecting this exact moment. She released her hold on the man beneath her, slowly, deliberately, placed both palms flat on the ground, then lowered herself until her cheek pressed against concrete still warm from the Arizona afternoon. A man with a knife had just tried to rob her. She had stopped him. And now, she was the one face down on the sidewalk, while the man who had attacked her was being helped to his feet by a second officer. 63 seconds earlier, she had called 911 herself, identified herself by name, described the robbery, told the dispatcher exactly where the knife was. None of that would matter tonight, because someone else had also called, an anonymous voice, 47 seconds of carefully chosen words, and that call was the one the officers had heard on their way to the scene. The 911 recording would later become evidence. Right now, it was just a voice pressed into a digital file somewhere in the Scottsdale Police Department's communications server, waiting to be found, or buried. Black female, mid-30s, dark hoodie, sitting on top of a white male on the sidewalk near Goldwater and 2nd. He's screaming. She's holding him down. Looks like an assault in progress. The dispatcher had asked for the caller's name. The line went dead. But the patrol units were already en route, dispatched on the word of a stranger who had watched just long enough to describe what he wanted people to see, and not 1 second longer. The woman on the ground, Simone Grayfield, 31 years old, 5'6", 123 pounds, kept her breathing even, kept her hands visible, kept her mouth shut, because she understood something that the officer standing over her with his weapon drawn did not. She understood that the next 60 seconds would determine whether this ended with a police report or a body bag, and she had been in positions like this before. Not this exact position, not face down on a public sidewalk, but positions where the wrong word at the wrong moment could change everything, where stillness was the only weapon that mattered. A folding knife lay 4 feet to her left on the concrete, 3.5 inches of blade, partially open, reflecting the cruiser's headlights. Nobody was looking at it, nobody had photographed it, nobody had asked where it came from, and the man she had restrained, the man who had slashed that knife across her shoulder hard enough to tear through her hoodie and leave a red line on her skin, was sitting up now, cradled by the second officer, crying about his shoulder. If this opening already has your pulse racing, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to take turns you will never see coming. 12 hours earlier, the day had started the way every day started for Simone Grayfield. 4:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the first of 3 alarms. She was already awake, had been for 6 minutes, lying still in the dark, running through her schedule the way she ran through everything, sequentially, precisely, without wasted motion. The rental house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into a living area with windows facing east. She had chosen it for the windows, morning light at 5 a.m., good sightlines to the street in both directions, and a back door that opened onto an alley, leading to a secondary exit route she had mapped on her first day. Not because she expected danger, because preparation was not something she turned on and off. It was how she existed. She made the bed first. Hospital corners, sheets pulled taut enough that a quarter would bounce if dropped on the surface. The pillows went in a specific order, firm on the left, soft on the right, decorative cushions centered at a 45-degree angle. She had been folding corners this way since she was 14. The habit had outlasted apartments, cities, relationships, and 2 career changes. Some things stayed with you because they were useful. Some stayed because they were the scaffolding that held everything else together. The kitchen told the same story. 5 meal prep containers in the refrigerator, labeled by time. 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 7 p.m. Each container held the same ratio of protein, complex carbohydrates, and greens. Each was portioned to the gram. The food scale sat on the counter next to a blender, a French press, and nothing else. No clutter, no decoration, just function. She stretched for 22 minutes. Hip flexors first, then rotator cuffs, then thoracic spine mobility, a sequence she had refined over years until it felt less like exercise and more like tuning an instrument. Every joint checked, every range of motion confirmed. She paid particular attention to her wrists and ankles, rotating them slowly, testing for any stiffness that had not been there the day before. Her body was her primary tool. Maintenance was not optional. By 5:20 she was outside, running east along Camelback Road before cutting south through the residential blocks toward Old Town. The October air was cool but dry. Desert mornings carried a clarity that she had learned to appreciate in the 6 months since she had moved to Scottsdale. Maryland had been humid. California had been expensive. Arizona was neither, and that was enough. She ran at a pace that would have looked casual to anyone watching, and someone was watching. 3 blocks into Old Town, she passed a storefront with hand-painted lettering across the glass. Dunning & Daughters. Fine Home Goods, Escalation 2011. The lights were off, but a woman stood at the window, phone in hand, watching Simone's reflection glide past in the pre-dawn half-light. Pamela Dunning, 54, owner and sole proprietor since her daughters had moved to Tucson and Portland respectively, lowered her phone after typing a short message. She did not wave. Simone did not look up, but the phone screen glowed for a moment longer, a rectangle of light in the dark shop before going dark. The message, posted to a neighborhood social media group called Old Town Scottsdale Watch, read, "Anyone else notice a woman running through Old Town every morning around 5? She doesn't look like she lives here. Just being vigilant." 3 people liked the post within the hour. One replied, "Which direction does she run?" Pamela typed back, "East toward the park, every single day." Simone did not know about the post. She did not know about Pamela Dunning at all. Not yet. She knew only that the boutique existed, that the window display changed every 2 weeks, and that the woman who owned it had a habit of standing near the glass at odd hours. Simone noticed things. It was not a choice. Her eyes cataloged movement, exits, potential threats, and anomalies the way other people's eyes cataloged weather or traffic. Peripheral awareness. She had picked it up from years of watching people try to read her movements, and she had never managed to turn it off. The coffee shop on Scottsdale Road opened at 5:30. Simone arrived at 5:41, ordered a black coffee and a plain bagel, and stood at the counter while the barista, early 20s, blonde ponytail, name tag reading Kelsey, prepared the order with the careful deliberation of someone on their second day of work. "Are you visiting, or do you work around here?" Kelsey asked, making conversation. "I live here." "Oh." A pause. The kind of pause that carried its own subtext. "That's cool. Which neighborhood?" "East of Old Town." Kelsey nodded, did not ask follow-up questions, but the man standing behind Simone in line, mid-50s, golf shirt, tanned in the particular way that suggested he spent more time outdoors than indoors, leaned toward the counter as Simone tapped her credit card. "You might want to run that twice," he said to Kelsey, not to Simone, to the barista, as if Simone were not standing right there. "Sometimes those cards are iffy." Kelsey froze. The card reader beeped its approval. Transaction complete. Simone picked up her coffee, left a $5 tip on a $4 order, walked out without looking at the man in the golf shirt. She did not need to look at him. She had memorized his face in the 3 seconds between his comment and the door. Not because she intended to do anything with the information, but because her mind cataloged threats the same way it cataloged exits. Automatically, without asking permission. The grocery store was worse. She went at 9 a.m., after her second meal and a 90-minute session at the fitness center on Thomas Road. The Safeway on Shea Boulevard was the closest full-service grocery to her rental. 4 miles, an easy drive, the kind of errand that should have taken 20 minutes and been forgotten by lunch. The security guard appeared in aisle 3. Dairy. Simone was comparing yogurt brands, Greek, plain, 2%, when she noticed him at the end of the aisle, hands clasped in front of him, watching her with the studied casualness of someone who had been told to be subtle and was failing at it. He was young, maybe 22, with a shaved head and a uniform that did not fit properly across the shoulders. His name badge read, Garrett. Simone moved to aisle 4. Garrett followed. Aisle 5. Garrett again. She adjusted her path deliberately, turned right instead of left, doubled back through produce, cut through the bakery section. Garrett stayed with her. Not close enough to be confrontational, close enough to be unmistakable. At the self-checkout, the machine flagged her order for age verification on a bottle of cooking wine. The attendant walked over, checked her ID, and paused. "This is a Maryland license." "I haven't updated it yet." The attendant studied the ID longer than necessary, turned it over, held it up as if checking for a watermark, then scanned it and handed it back without comment. Behind her, Garrett stood near the exit, arms crossed, watching her leave. Simone loaded her groceries into the trunk of her car, a dark gray Honda Civic, 4 years old, unremarkable in every way, and sat behind the wheel for a moment. She did not sigh, did not shake her head, did not perform any of the small emotional releases that might have made the morning's accumulation of indignities easier to carry. She simply sat, hands at 10 and 2, and let the engine idle while she ran the sequence back. The barista's question, the man's comment about the card, the security guard's shadow, the attendant's suspicion. 4 interactions, 4 assumptions. Before noon, she put the car in reverse, pulled out of the parking space, and drove home to unpack groceries with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. Every item in its designated place, every label facing forward, every container aligned. Simone spent the afternoon reviewing a document on her phone. Dense paragraphs, small print, penalty clauses, performance benchmarks, and a termination provision that she read 3 times before texting a single word to a number saved without a contact name. Noted. The document was a contract. What kind? She did not discuss with anyone. But she read it the way a person reads something that governs their livelihood, carefully, skeptically, with a pen ready to mark the margins. By 6 p.m., the sun was dropping behind the McDowell Mountains, and the temperature had eased from dry heat into something almost pleasant. Simone changed into a fresh hoodie, black, oversized, the kind of garment that made her look smaller than she was, and walked toward Old Town. The walk was a habit. Every evening, same route, same pace. South on her residential street, west on Indian School Road, then a loop through the Old Town grid before cutting east to the park on 68th Street. She passed the same buildings every night. The art galleries with their turquoise doors, the restaurants setting out sidewalk tables, the mixed-use building on the corner of Goldwater and 2nd with its gray stucco facade, and the small black security camera mounted above the entrance. She noticed the camera every time she passed, not because she was concerned about being watched, because she noticed cameras the way she noticed exits and shadows, and the spacing of streetlights, reflexively, without effort, a running inventory of her environment that never stopped updating. Craig Loomis owned that building. She did not know that yet. She did not know that the camera's hard drive held footage that would later become the single most important piece of evidence in her life. She knew only that it was there, pointed at the sidewalk, and that its red recording light was on. She sat on a bench in the park for 15 minutes, watching joggers and dog walkers and a pair of teenagers throwing a frisbee that kept sailing over the fence into the street. She checked her phone once, the contract again, scrolling to a specific clause about compensation structures and match scheduling, then put it away and started walking home. Goldwater Boulevard after 7 p.m. was quiet. The boutiques were closed. The restaurants were 2 blocks north, their noise and light reduced to a hum that barely reached this stretch of sidewalk. Streetlights cast yellow cones on the pavement at intervals that left pools of shadow between them. Simone walked in the light where she could, stepped through the dark where she had to. She heard the footsteps before she saw the man. Not walking, running, accelerating from behind her with the particular urgency that separates a jogger from someone closing distance on purpose. The sneakers were wrong, heavy, slapping the pavement with the flat-footed impact of someone who did not run regularly. And they were getting louder at a rate that meant he would reach her in 3, maybe 4 seconds. Simone shifted her weight forward. Not a conscious decision, a reaction drilled so deeply into her nervous system that it bypassed thought entirely. Her left hand moved to her purse strap. Her right hand opened, fingers spreading, wrist rotating slightly outward. Her chin dropped half an inch. The hand that grabbed her purse strap came from behind and to the right. Hard. Violent. The strap bit into her shoulder before the clasp gave way, and in the fraction of a second between the grab and the release, she was already turning. Hips rotating first, shoulders following, eyes finding the threat. Brock Calloway was 28 years old, 5'11", 185 pounds. He had 2 prior theft convictions and a warrant for failure to appear on a shoplifting charge in Tempe. None of those facts mattered in this moment. What mattered was the folding knife in his right hand, 3.5 inches of blade, partially serrated, catching the streetlight as he slashed it toward her midsection. The blade caught the fabric of her hoodie at the left shoulder. It tore through the cotton and nicked the skin beneath. A shallow cut, barely bleeding, but enough to send a spike of adrenaline through her body that clarified everything. He lunged again, arm extended, knife forward, weight committed to the thrust. What happened next took 4 seconds. She stepped laterally, not backward, which would have kept her in the knife's path, but to the left, angling off the line of attack. Her left hand caught his wrist from the outside. Her right hand came underneath his elbow. She redirected the knife arm outward, extending his elbow past its natural range of motion. The knife dropped. It hit the concrete with a sound like a small bell. Then she swept his lead leg. A hip displacement, her hip against his, her center of gravity lower, her base wider. He went down, Hard. The back of his head hit the sidewalk. His right arm was still extended, and she transitioned into a mounted position, her knees on either side of his torso, her left hand controlling his wrist, her right hand pressing his opposite shoulder into the ground. He thrashed, grabbed at her hoodie with his free hand. She applied pressure to his right shoulder, a joint manipulation, steady and controlled, rotating the humerus past its comfortable range until she felt the resistance give. The shoulder dislocated with a wet pop that she felt through her fingers. He screamed, a raw animal sound that echoed off the buildings. She released the pressure immediately, but she did not let go. She held him in place, pinned, controlled, neutralized, and looked toward the street. A car was passing. Silver sedan, windows up. "Call 911, she shouted. "I need police and an ambulance. This man just tried to rob me." The sedan slowed, then accelerated. The driver either did not hear or did not want to get involved. Simone shifted her weight, freed her left hand from his wrist. He was no longer fighting, just moaning, his right arm hanging at an angle that arms are not supposed to hang, and pulled her phone from her pocket. She dialed 911 with her thumb. "Scottsdale 911. What is your emergency?" "My name is Simone Grayfield. I'm on Goldwater Boulevard near 2nd Street. A man just attempted to rob me at knife point. I restrained him. He has a dislocated shoulder and needs medical attention. The knife is on the ground next to us. I'm holding him until officers arrive." The dispatcher asked her to stay on the line. She did. 2 minutes and 11 seconds. She provided a description of Brock. She confirmed her own location twice. She mentioned the knife 3 times. 63 seconds after she hung up, a second call came into the same dispatch center. An unidentified male voice. 47 seconds. No name given. "Yeah, I'm near Goldwater and 2nd in Old Town. There's a black female sitting on top of a white male on the sidewalk. He's screaming. Looks like she's assaulting him." The dispatcher asked for the caller's name. The line went dead, but the patrol units were already rolling. 2 cruisers. Officers Wade Pryor and Elena Ruiz in the first. Officers Dalton Kemp and Rachel Sosa in the second. They arrived at 7:41 p.m., 3 minutes after Simone's call, 2 minutes after the anonymous one. Pryor was first out of the car, weapon drawn, flashlight in his left hand. The beam hit Simone's face, then swept down to her hands, then across to the man beneath her. "Get off him! Hands behind your back! Now, on the ground!" Simone released her hold, placed her palms flat, lowered herself to the concrete. "He tried to rob me," she said, her voice steady, controlled, the kind of calm that comes not from the absence of fear, but from years of managing it. "There's a knife on the ground. Right there, to my left. About 4 feet. Pryor cuffed her. Hands behind her back, the metal too tight on her left wrist, the right wrist positioned so the edge of the cuff pressed against the bone. She did not complain, did not resist, did not do anything that could later be described as non-compliant. Ruiz helped Brock sit up. He was sobbing, clutching his right arm against his chest. His face was scraped from the pavement, abrasions on his forehead and chin. His shirt was torn. He looked destroyed. "She jumped me," Brock said between gasps. "I was walking. She came out of nowhere. My shoulder. I think it's broken." Ruiz called for an ambulance. Kemp and Sosa began stringing yellow tape, and Pryor stood over Simone with his flashlight pointed at her face, asking questions that were not questions. "You want to tell me what happened here?" "I already told the dispatcher. He attempted an armed robbery. I defended myself." "An armed robbery?" Pryor's tone carried the weight of a man who had already decided what he was looking at. "With what weapon?" "A folding knife. It's on the ground. I told you. 4 feet to my left." Pryor's flashlight swept the area. It found the knife. Small, partially open, lying on the concrete exactly where she said it would be. The beam lingered for a moment. Then Pryor stepped forward, and his body blocked the knife from the body cam mounted on his chest. When he moved again, the knife was still there, but his body cam, timestamped 7:42 p.m., 16 seconds, showed the blade for exactly 3 seconds before Pryor's torso filled the frame. When the angle cleared, the knife was no longer in its original position. Nobody bagged the knife at the scene. It would appear 4 hours later in the evidence inventory, listed as folding knife, found 12 feet from suspect. Not 4 feet. 12. The ambulance arrived at 7:49. Brock was loaded onto a stretcher, still crying, still repeating his story to anyone who would listen. She attacked him. He was just walking. She came out of nowhere. The paramedics noted his injuries: dislocated right shoulder, probable rib fracture, facial abrasions, and transported him to Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. Simone was placed in the back of Pryor's patrol car. No seatbelt offered. The partition between front and back smelled like disinfectant and old sweat. Through the mesh, she could see Pryor and Ruiz conferring outside, heads together, voices low, gestures that included pointing at the spot where the knife had been and then at the spot where Brock had been helped up. Ruiz walked over to the ambulance as it was pulling away. She spoke to someone through the back window, Brock, presumably, for about 30 seconds, then returned to Pryor and said something that made him nod twice. Nobody came to the patrol car to ask Simone for her version of events. Nobody took photographs of the tear in her hoodie, the cut on her shoulder, the torn purse strap that was still tangled around Brock's left hand when the ambulance departed. Nobody asked to see her phone, which still showed the 911 call log. Outgoing, 7:38 p.m. Duration 2 minutes 11 seconds. The drive to the station took 9 minutes. Simone counted the turns, left on Camelback, right on Scottsdale Road, left on Osborne. She mapped the route automatically, the same way she mapped every route, every building, every room she entered. Not because she expected to need an escape, because knowing where you are is the first step in controlling what happens to you. At the Scottsdale Police Department's main station on Goldwater Boulevard, she was led through a side entrance, past a booking desk staffed by a sergeant whose name she did not catch, and into a processing area with fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency just below comfortable. Fingerprints, photographs. The process was designed to feel routine, but every step carried a small erosion of dignity. The ink on her fingers, the numbered placard held against her chest, the instruction to turn left, now right, now face forward. "Is this being logged in your report system in real time?" she asked the booking officer. "Or is it batch processed at end of shift?" The officer, a woman in her 30s with short hair and the expression of someone who had processed 1,000 arrests and preferred not to process one more, looked up from her keyboard. The question was oddly specific, the kind of question that civilians almost never asked. "Real time," the officer said after a pause. "And the 911 call recordings? Those are retained for how long under your department's policy?" "Ma'am, you can ask your attorney about that." "I'm asking you. It's a matter of public record." The officer stared at her, then went back to typing. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Simone let it hang. She had asked on purpose, not because she needed the answer, she already knew it, but because she wanted a record, in the booking officer's memory if nowhere else, that she had been thinking about documentation from the very first moment she entered the system. Before interrogation, they read her Miranda rights, required before custodial questioning, not at the moment of arrest, which was a distinction most people did not know and most officers did not bother to explain. Simone knew the distinction. She knew many distinctions. And then she made her first mistake. "Do you wish to have an attorney present during questioning?" "No, I can explain what happened." It was not arrogance. It was confidence. The confidence of someone who had been telling the truth from the first second and could not imagine a system that would punish her for it. She had called 911 herself. She had identified the knife. She had described the robbery. The facts were on her side, and she believed facts were enough. They were not. The interrogation lasted 47 minutes. She told the same story 3 times. Each time, the detective, not Underhill, not yet, just a night shift detective named Bowman, who smelled like vending machine coffee and looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, circled back to the same question. "So you're saying a man attacked you with a knife, and you—" "What, exactly? Wrestled him to the ground? Dislocated his shoulder? I defended myself. How? You're, what, 5'6"? 5'7"? He's got 60 pounds on you. How does someone your size take down a man his size and cause that kind of injury?" The question was not unreasonable, and Simone could have answered it, fully, completely, with enough detail to make it unmistakable. But something stopped her, an instinct she could not name, a voice in the back of her mind that said, "Not yet. Not to these people. Not in this room." "I took a self-defense class," she said. "A self-defense class?" "Yes." "Which one?" "I don't remember the name. It was a few years ago." Bowman wrote something in his notepad, underlined it twice, then closed the notepad and pushed back from the table. "We're going to hold you overnight. Initial appearance in front of a judge within 24 hours. You might want to reconsider that, attorney." They put her in a holding cell at 11:14 p.m., metal bench, thin mattress, a toilet with no lid in the corner. The lights stayed on. The door locked with a sound she recognized, a heavy electromagnetic bolt, the kind used in facilities that prioritize security over comfort. Simone sat on the bench, placed her hands on her knees, closed her eyes, and began to recite silently, every detail she could remember. The time of the attack, the angle of the knife, the number of steps between the first grab and the last moment of control, the location of the knife when she released Brock, the position of the officers when they arrived, the words she had used on the 911 call. She had been trained to do this, not by the police, not by a lawyer, by someone else entirely, in a context she had never discussed with anyone in Scottsdale. The discipline of mental replay, reconstructing events in chronological order, tagging each detail with sensory information, building a record that existed in memory, even if every other form of evidence disappeared. She would need that record, because by morning, the story had already begun to change. Simone's initial appearance was scheduled for the following afternoon, 18 hours after her arrest, within the 24-hour window required by Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 13-3903. The courtroom was small, a magistrate's hearing room on the second floor of the Scottsdale City Court building, with plastic chairs bolted to the floor and a judge's bench that looked like it had been purchased from a catalog in the 1980s. The public defender assigned to her case was a man named Nelson Voss. He arrived 4 minutes before the hearing, carrying a stack of files thick enough to suggest that Simone's case was one of many he would handle that day, and introduced himself with the efficient friendliness of someone who did this 60 times a month. Ms. Grayfield, Nelson Voss, public defender. I've reviewed the arrest report. The charge is assault. ARS 13-1203. We're going to enter a not guilty plea and request reasonable bail. Do you have any questions? The charge should be dropped entirely. I acted in self-defense. I understand and will argue that, but today is just the initial appearance, bail and plea. We'll build the defense after. There's a knife. He had a knife. It should be in the evidence log. Voss flipped through his papers, frowned. The report mentions a folding knife recovered at the scene, 12 feet from you, but it doesn't specify whose it was. It was his. He pulled it during the robbery. I told the 911 dispatcher. The call is recorded. Voss made a note. The hearing lasted 6 minutes. Bail was set at $5,000. Simone posted it with her debit card. Money she had been saving for equipment and travel expenses related to work she did not describe to Voss. She walked out of the courthouse at 3:47 p.m. on October 15th, 28 hours after the robbery, with a court date 6 weeks away and an assault charge on her record. The first thing she did was drive to her rental house, change clothes, and sit at the kitchen table with a notebook. She wrote for 90 minutes. Dates, times, direct quotes, physical descriptions, badge numbers she had memorized from the officers' uniforms, the exact words of the booking officer, the exact words of Detective Bowman, the sequence of events from the first footstep behind her to the moment the cell door closed. She wrote it all in block letters, neat, organized, the handwriting of someone accustomed to producing documents that might one day be read by people she had never met. Then she called a number on her phone, no contact name, just digits, and left a voicemail. It's me. I had an incident. I'm fine. But I need to postpone the November timeline. I'll explain when I can. She did not say what the November timeline was. She did not explain the incident. She hung up, placed the phone face down on the table, and stared at the wall for a long time. Outside, the Scottsdale sun was setting behind the mountains, turning the sky the color of a bruise. If you think this is just a robbery gone wrong, you haven't been paying attention. Hit that like button, because the people who did this to her have no idea what they've started. The petition appeared online 3 days after Simone's arrest. Pamela Dunning had been busy. Justice for Brock, Prosecute Street Violence in Old Town, was the title, hosted on a popular petition platform with a header image of Goldwater Boulevard at sunset, a pretty picture of a pretty street, designed to make you feel that something precious was being threatened. The petition text was 8 paragraphs long. It mentioned a violent assault on an innocent pedestrian. It mentioned escalating crime in our community. It mentioned the need for prosecutors to take street violence seriously, regardless of who commits it. It did not mention race. Not directly. The language was careful, the kind of careful that comes from someone who understands exactly what she is implying and knows better than to say it out loud. People moving into our neighborhood who don't share our values. A changing community that needs to stand up for safety. An outsider who brought violence to a street where families walk at night. Pamela had witnessed the incident. That much was true. She had been in her boutique after hours, doing inventory, when she heard screaming from the sidewalk. She had run to the window and seen a black woman in a dark hoodie, mounted on top of a white man, the man screaming, the woman holding him down. She had not seen the knife, had not seen the grab, had not seen the slash or the takedown. She had seen the last 15 seconds of a 4-second self-defense encounter, and from those 15 seconds, she had constructed an entire narrative. Her police statement, given the morning after the arrest, read in part, "I observed a black female, approximately 5'6", sitting on top of a white male on the sidewalk. The male was screaming in pain. The female appeared to be restraining him aggressively. I did not observe any weapon. It looked like a beating." The petition gathered 340 signatures in 4 days. Local television covered it on day 5, a 30-second segment on the evening news, just enough to put Pamela's face and Simone's mugshot side by side on screens across the valley. Pamela did a live interview with a reporter from the local affiliate. She stood in front of her boutique, a hand-lettered sign in the window reading "Keep Old Town Safe," and spoke in the measured tone of a woman who had rehearsed her talking points. "This neighborhood used to be safe. My customers, families, tourists, they came here because they felt comfortable. Now we have people moving in who bring violence with them. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone specifically. I'm just saying what I saw." The reporter asked if she believed the woman should be prosecuted. "I believe in the justice system. I saw a man being beaten on the street. If there's a reason for it, the courts will figure that out. But in the meantime, I want my community to know that we're watching, we're paying attention, and we won't tolerate violence." Simone watched the interview on her phone, sitting in her car in the parking lot of the fitness center on Thomas Road. She watched it twice. Then she opened her notebook and wrote, "Pamela Dunning, Dunning & Daughters Boutique, interview with Channel 12, October 19th, 5:42 p.m. Direct quote, people moving in who bring violence with them." Did not identify what she actually witnessed or when she arrived at the window. She closed the notebook, put it in her glove compartment, went inside to train. The fitness center was a commercial gym. Weights, cardio machines, a boxing area in the back corner with 2 heavy bags, and a speed bag that nobody used correctly. Simone had a membership under her own name. She came 3 times a week for what she described to the front desk as general fitness. The other 4 days, she drove 40 minutes to a facility in Tempe that she never discussed with anyone in Scottsdale. Today she worked the heavy bag. Combinations, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, delivered with a speed and precision that drew glances from the free weight area. A man on the bench press watched her for 30 seconds, then turned to his spotter. "She hits harder than most guys in here," he said, loud enough for Simone to hear. She did not respond. She finished her round, unwrapped her hands, wiped down the bag with a gym towel, and left. She did not socialize at this gym. She did not make friends. She came, she worked, she left. It was not unfriendliness. It was compartmentalization. The same instinct that kept her rental house sparse and her schedule rigid. The fewer people who knew the details of her life, the fewer people could use those details against her. But details were leaking anyway. The petition had names attached to it: neighbors, business owners, people who lived within a mile radius of the incident, and some of those names belonged to people who knew where Simone lived. On October 21st, 7 days after the robbery, a woman Simone recognized as a neighbor from 2 houses down appeared in her driveway as she was returning from an evening run. The woman was holding a rolled-up newspaper like a baton, her posture rigid with the kind of righteous energy that comes from feeling like you are on the right side of something. "Excuse me." Simone stopped, pulled her earbuds out, waited. "I don't want to be rude, but there's been talk in the neighborhood about what happened last week. I'm aware. Some of us are concerned about safety, about the situation." The woman's voice tightened on the word situation. Her eyes flicked to Simone's hands, her arms, her shoulders, measuring, assessing, trying to reconcile the person standing in front of her with the mugshot that had been on the news. "I understand your concern," Simone said. Her voice was even. Not warm, not cold, the carefully calibrated tone of someone who had learned that emotional displays in moments like this only made things worse. "I was the victim of an attempted robbery. The legal process will show that." "Well?" The woman shifted her weight. We don't want trouble here." "Neither do I." The woman left. Simone went inside, locked the door, and stood in her kitchen for a full minute, hands flat on the counter, eyes closed. The conversation had lasted 45 seconds. It felt like 45 minutes. She added it to the notebook: date, time, approximate quote, the woman's description, the direction she walked when she left. Another entry in a growing archive that Simone was building with the meticulous attention of someone who understood that memory was unreliable, but ink was permanent. Her landlord called the next morning, a Mr. Wyand, property management company based in Phoenix. He was polite. He was careful. He had received multiple calls from other tenants and neighbors expressing concern about Simone's arrest. "I want to be clear," he said. "This isn't an eviction notice. Your lease is valid through April. But I have an obligation to address community concerns, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to let you know that we're aware of the situation." "Are you asking me to leave?" "I'm asking you to be aware that the community has concerns. The community has concerns about a woman who was robbed at knife point defending herself." A pause. The details of the incident are for the courts to decide. I'm communicating, Ms. Grayfield. That's all." She thanked him for calling. Hung up. Added it to the notebook. The gym got a call too. The fitness center manager, a 26-year-old named Travis, who spent more time on Instagram than on floor management, pulled Simone aside after her Thursday session. "Hey, so someone called and asked if we were aware that one of our clients was arrested for assault. I told them it wasn't our business, but I wanted to give you a heads up." "Thank you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She was not fine, but fine was the word that kept conversations short, and short conversations were all she could afford right now. Detective Ferris Underhill entered the picture on October 23rd, 9 days after the incident. He was assigned the case after it was flagged for potential upgrade. Brock Calloway's medical records had arrived, and the severity of his injuries triggered a review protocol that bumped the file from the night shift detective's desk to the major crimes unit. Underhill was 43, methodical, and experienced enough to know that every case had a narrative, and the narrative's architect determined its outcome. He was not corrupt in the way that television portrays corruption. No planted evidence, no whispered threats, no envelope of cash in a parking garage. He was corrupt in a more insidious way. He was selective. He chose which facts to emphasize and which to omit, which witnesses to interview and which to overlook, which timelines to verify and which to accept at face value. The story he built was never factually false. It was structurally incomplete, and structural incompleteness in a courtroom could be just as devastating as a lie. He interviewed Pamela Dunning first. Her statement became the centerpiece of his report. Eyewitness testimony from a respected local business owner who had no prior relationship with either party. Clean, credible, devastating. He interviewed Brock Calloway at the hospital. Brock's story had solidified in the weeks since the incident, shaped by a conversation he'd had with Officer Pryor at the scene that nobody else had witnessed, but that Brock's cousin Derek would later allude to in a moment of careless anger. Brock's statement was simple. He was walking on Goldwater Boulevard. A woman he had never seen before attacked him without provocation. He did not have a knife. He had never owned a knife. His injuries, dislocated shoulder, cracked fourth rib, facial contusions, were the result of an unprovoked assault by a stranger. Underhill photographed Brock's injuries. The images were devastating. The shoulder, swollen and discolored. The rib area, bruised purple across the entire right side. The face, scraped raw, where it had hit the pavement. These photographs would later be presented to a judge and to prospective jurors, and they would tell a story of their own, a story of a man who had been broken by someone stronger, someone more violent, someone dangerous. What Underhill did not photograph were Brock's hands, specifically the lacerations on Brock's right palm and fingers, cuts consistent with gripping a sharp object. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, the emergency room physician who had treated Brock on the night of the incident, had documented those cuts in his medical notes. They were part of the record. Underhill had the medical records. He chose not to include the hand lacerations in his report. He also did not interview the driver of the silver sedan, the one Simone had shouted to from the sidewalk. He did not pull the full 911 call log. He pulled the second call, the anonymous one, and referenced it in his report as the 911 call that prompted police response. He did not mention that a first call existed. He did not mention that the first caller was Simone herself. And he did not promptly subpoena the security footage from Craig Loomis's building, the camera that had recorded the entire encounter from beginning to end. He would later explain this as a resource allocation decision. We had an eyewitness statement and medical evidence. The camera footage was noted for follow-up. Noted for follow-up. The two most dangerous words in a police investigation because they sounded productive while ensuring nothing happened. 3 weeks after the arrest, Underhill recommended that the charge be upgraded. His memo to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office read, in the dry language of bureaucratic persuasion, based on the severity of the complainant's injuries, dislocated shoulder requiring surgical intervention, fractured rib, extensive facial abrasions, the charge should be elevated from misdemeanor assault under ARS Section 13-1203 to aggravated assault under Section 13-1204, subsection A, paragraph 1, causing serious physical injury. The county attorney agreed. The charge was upgraded, and Simone Grayfield's bail was reset at $25,000. She posted it, wrote a check from a savings account she had been building for 3 years. Money earmarked for travel, equipment, preparation for events she could not currently discuss with her attorney or anyone else. The check cleared, but the account balance dropped to a level that made her stomach tight. Voss met her outside the courthouse after the bail hearing, carrying a manila folder with the discovery materials the prosecution had provided. They sat in his car, a 10-year-old Nissan with coffee stains on the passenger seat, because his office was a 20-minute drive away and the conversation could not wait. They upgraded to aggravated, Voss said, flipping open the folder. The prosecution's case is built on 3 pillars: Pamela Dunning's eyewitness statement, Calloway's medical records, and Underhill's investigative report. It's a tight package. I need to be honest with you about that. Simone took the folder. Read it, every page, every line, every footnote. Voss watched her. Watched the way her eyes moved across the text with a focus that was more analytical than anxious, more professional than panicked. She read the way someone reads a document they have been trained to read, systematically, looking for gaps. She found one on page 8. Paragraph 14, she said. Voss leaned over. What about it? He says the knife was found 12 feet from me. She looked up. On my 911 call, I told the dispatcher the knife was on the ground next to us. 4 feet, maybe less. If it was found 12 feet away, someone moved it between the time I called and the time it was logged. Voss stared at her. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, long enough to become uncomfortable, long enough for the question forming behind his eyes to almost reach his mouth before he decided not to ask it. How did you catch that? He said instead. I read contracts for a living. She closed the folder. Details matter. Voss drove her home. Neither of them spoke for most of the ride. At her driveway, he handed her a business card. I'm going to file a motion to compel full discovery under Rule 15.1. That includes the complete 911 call log, all body cam footage, and the security camera recording from the building near the scene. It'll take 30 days, maybe more, but we'll get it. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you stay out of trouble. You don't talk to anyone about the case, and you don't give Pamela Dunning any more ammunition for her petition. Simone nodded, went inside, locked the door. She did not tell Voss about the notebook. She did not tell him about the numbers she had called to postpone the November timeline. She did not tell him anything that was not directly relevant to the legal case in front of them. She trusted him to do his job. She did not trust him with the rest. The preliminary hearing was held on November 18th, 5 weeks after the arrest, in a courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Maricopa County Superior Court building in downtown Phoenix. The room was larger than the magistrate's chamber, where the initial appearance had taken place, with real wooden benches and a judge who looked like he had been doing this long enough to have opinions about everything and the authority to enforce them. Judge Harold Wellman, 61. 23 years on the bench. Known for running a tight calendar and asking questions that attorneys wished he would not ask. The prosecution was represented by Assistant County Attorney Diane Prescott, mid-40s, sharp features, the kind of lawyer who prepared for hearings the way generals prepare for battles, with contingency plans for contingency plans. She presented her case in 22 minutes. Pamela Dunning's statement, Brock's medical records, the photographs, Underhill's report. She did not mention the 911 call log. She did not mention the body cam footage. She presented what she had, and what she had was damning. Voss argued self-defense under ARS Section 13-404. He was competent, he was prepared, but he was also spread thin. Simone's was one of 63 active cases on his docket, and his argument showed the strain. He cited the statute correctly, referenced the defendant's 911 call as evidence of good faith, and requested dismissal. Judge Wellman listened, then asked the question that changed everything. The injuries documented in the medical report are significant, counselor. Dislocated shoulder requiring surgical repair, fractured rib, extensive facial abrasions. Your client is listed at 5'6", 123 pounds. The complainant is 5'11", 185. The court needs to understand how someone of the defendant's stature inflicted this level of physical damage in what you describe as a brief self-defense encounter. Voss hesitated. It was the right question and the worst possible question, because answering it honestly, explaining how Simone had taken down a man 60 pounds heavier than her, with 2 precise movements and a joint lock, would invite a follow-up that neither of them was prepared for. Where did you learn that? What training do you have? And any truthful answer would hand the prosecution exactly the reframing they needed. someone with advanced skills using those skills on a civilian. Disproportionate force, elevated standard of care. Under the table, Simone's hand found Voss's arm. She leaned in. "Don't answer that yet," she whispered. "We need the footage first." Voss cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the defense anticipates that additional evidence, specifically security camera footage from a nearby building and the complete 911 call log, will provide full context for the encounter. We have a motion to compel pending. We request that the court reserve judgment on the proportionality question until that evidence is available." Wellman considered this, then nodded. "The court finds probable cause to bind the case over for trial. The defense's motion to compel is noted and will be addressed on the record. Trial date, January 22nd. He banged the gavel once. "Next case?" Simone sat still for a moment after the courtroom cleared. The charge stood. The trial was 3 months away, and the question that Judge Wellman had asked, how did she do it, hung over everything like a blade. Voss drove her back to Scottsdale. In the car, he pulled a flash drive from his breast pocket. The bodycam footage came in yesterday, Pryor's chest camera. 11 minutes, 43 seconds. "Play it." He plugged the drive into his laptop, balanced on the center console. The footage was grainy, time-stamped, shot from the angle of Pryor's chest, which meant it showed what Pryor was facing, but only when he was facing it. The first 2 minutes were black. "Where's the beginning?" Simone asked. "Activation delay, according to the department. Camera takes time to boot up when the officer engages it. Standard activation is 30 seconds, not 2 minutes. Voss looked at her. That same look from the car, the one that said, "How do you know that?" And the same decision not to ask. The footage picked up at 7:42 p.m., with Pryor already shouting commands. Simone was visible on the ground, Brock was visible on the ground, and at timestamp 7:42:16, the knife was visible, a small metallic shape on the concrete, partially open, catching the cruiser's headlights, for 3 seconds. Then Pryor's body moved into the frame, blocking the knife from view. When the angle cleared, 7:42:21, the knife was gone from its original position. "He stepped in front of it," Simone said. "That could be coincidental." And it could not. Voss closed the laptop, sat in silence for a moment. "I'll request the full IT log for the body cam, activation times, pause records, everything, and I'll file the Brady motion tomorrow." "Brady versus Maryland," Simone said quietly. "Prosecution's obligation to disclose exculpatory evidence. You know Brady?" "I read." She did not say what she read. Voss did not ask. But that night, in the parking lot of the fitness center on Thomas Road, the case took a turn that nobody expected. Simone was walking to her car after an evening session, 7:45 p.m., the lot half empty, overhead lights casting orange pools on the asphalt. She was carrying her gym bag in her left hand, keys in her right, moving with the unhurried pace of someone who was tired but not careless. 2 men were leaning against a pickup truck parked next to her Civic. She saw them from 30 feet away, calculated the angles automatically: her car, their truck, the nearest exit, the distance to the gym's front door. One of them was tall, early 30s, with a jaw like a shovel and arms that suggested manual labor or serious weight training. The other was shorter, heavier, with a ball cap pulled low over his eyes. The tall one pushed off the truck as she approached. "Simone Grayfield?" She stopped. 6 feet of distance, just outside arm's reach. "Who's asking?" "Derek Calloway. Brock's my cousin." The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. She felt the ripple move through her body. Not fear exactly, but the heightened awareness that preceded fear. The biochemical pre-stage that prepared muscles and nerves for something that might be coming. "My cousin's got a metal plate in his shoulder now." Derek's voice was flat, controlled. The kind of controlled that meant he had rehearsed this, had driven across town with a script in his head and a point to make. "Can't work. Can't lift anything heavier than a coffee cup. Can't pay rent. His insurance doesn't cover the physical therapy. You did that. Your cousin pulled a knife on me. That's not what the police say." "The police haven't said anything yet. The case is pending." Derek stepped closer. 5 feet, 4. Close enough that she could smell cigarette smoke on his jacket and see the vein pulsing at his temple. Her body shifted. Weight transferred to the balls of her feet. Hands opened, fingers loose, palms slightly forward. Chin dropped half an inch, spine straightened. The stance was automatic, as natural to her as breathing, a posture she had drilled 10,000 times until it lived in her muscles rather than her mind. Derek noticed. He did not know what he was noticing. His conscious mind registered only that something about her had changed, something that made the space between them feel smaller and more dangerous. But his body knew. He stepped back. Half a step. Enough. The shorter man with the ball cap shifted his weight. Did not speak. Did not need to. His presence was the message. We came together, and we could come back. "We're done here," Simone said. She walked to her car, got in, locked the doors, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot without looking back. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. The first visible crack in the composure she had maintained since the night of the arrest. Adrenaline metabolizing into something less useful. Not fear, but the residue of fear, the chemical aftermath that made her fingers tremor and her jaw clench. She called Voss from the road. "Two men just approached me in the gym parking lot. One identified himself as Derek Calloway, Brock's cousin. He confronted me about Brock's injuries. The second man did not identify himself. No physical contact was made. No direct threat was verbalized, but the intent was intimidation." Voss filed a report the next morning. The police response, delivered by phone 48 hours later, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic inadequacy. No physical contact was made. No verbal threat was documented. The interaction, while understandably concerning, does not meet the threshold for criminal harassment or witness intimidation under Arizona statute. We have documented the complaint for the record. Documented. For the record. The same words Underhill had used about the security footage. Simone added the encounter to her notebook. Date, time, descriptions, exact quotes, the make and color of Derek's pickup truck, the partial plate number she had memorized in the 3 seconds between getting into her car and pulling away. She wrote it all down. Then she closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer next to her bed, beside the contract she was still reviewing, and a small leather case she had brought with her from Maryland that she never opened in daylight. Across the parking lot, sitting in a gray Subaru Outback with a press credential dangling from the rearview mirror, a man named Terrence Boyle had watched the entire encounter. Boyle was 37, a reporter for the Scottsdale Independent, and he had been following the Grayfield case since Pamela Dunning's petition had crossed his desk 2 weeks earlier. Something about the story did not add up. The petition was too organized, the narrative too clean, the timeline too convenient. Boyle had learned, in 12 years of local journalism, that when a story seemed simple, it usually was not. He had come to the gym on a tip. Someone at the police station had mentioned that the defendant frequented this location. Hoping to observe her, get a sense of who she was before requesting a formal interview. What he had observed instead was a confrontation that raised more questions than it answered. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Subject confronted in parking lot by 2 males, one identified as relative of complainant. Subject maintained extraordinary composure, spatial awareness, controlled breathing, defensive posture that shifted the dynamic without a word being spoken. She moved like someone who's been in a cage before. Not prison. Something else." He underlined "something else" twice, then started his car and drove back to the newsroom, thinking about 911 call logs and the kind of records that became public once they were filed with the court. This is far from over. If you want to see what happens when the truth starts coming out, and believe me you do, hit that like button and subscribe. The next part is going to shock you. Voss's motion to compel bore fruit on November 29th, 46 days after the arrest. The court ordered the Scottsdale Police Department to produce, within 14 days, the following: complete 911 call log for the evening of October 14th, all bodycam footage from responding officers, and all evidence inventory documentation including chain of custody records. The department complied, partially. The 911 call log arrived first, and what it showed cracked the prosecution's case like a hammer through thin ice. Scottsdale Police Department, Communications Division. Call log, October 14th. Case number SP-2024-7831. Call 1. 7:38 p.m. Incoming. Caller identified as Simone Grayfield, cell number on file. Duration, 2 minutes, 11 seconds. Caller reports attempted armed robbery at knife point. Requests police and ambulance. Provides detailed description of suspect. White male, late 20s, approximately 5'11", gray hoodie, jeans. States, quote, "I had to restrain him. He had a knife. The knife is on the ground next to us. I'm holding him until police arrive," end quote. Call 2, 7:39 p.m. Incoming. Caller unidentified. Duration, 47 seconds. Caller reports, quote, "A black female beating a white male on the sidewalk near Goldwater and 2nd. Refuses to provide name. Line disconnects upon request for identification. Simone had called first. 63 seconds before the anonymous caller. She had identified herself. She had described the robbery. She had told the dispatcher about the knife. She had said she was restraining, not attacking. The prosecution's initial discovery had included only call 2. Voss sat in his office reading the log for the third time, then called Simone. "They buried your call." "I know." "You knew?" "I called 911 at 7:38. The police didn't arrive until 7:41. They responded to the second call. I could hear it on the radio when Pryor pulled up. He said, responding to a report of an assault, not responding to a report of a robbery. The framing was wrong from the first second. Voss was quiet for a long moment. "How did you—" "Never mind. We need to file a Brady motion. Tomorrow. This is textbook suppression of exculpatory evidence." "File it." He did. The motion, referencing Brady v. Maryland, 373 U.S. 83, argued that the prosecution had failed to disclose evidence directly favorable to the defense. A 911 call from the defendant herself, made before the anonymous call, identifying the incident as an armed robbery and describing the knife's location. The motion requested sanctions against the prosecution and immediate disclosure of any additional withheld materials. The prosecution responded with the institutional equivalent of a shrug. The call log was included in the complete dispatch record provided to defense counsel. The specific call-by-call breakdown was not separately identified because it was part of a larger document set. In other words, it was there, but we made sure it was buried deep enough that you might not find it. Judge Wellman was not amused. He scheduled a hearing on the Brady motion for December 16th and issued an order for the prosecution to confirm, under oath, that no additional exculpatory materials remained undisclosed. Meanwhile, Voss had hired a private digital forensics consultant named Garrett Innes to examine the bodycam footage. Innes was not cheap, $1,200 for a preliminary analysis, and Voss's office did not have the budget. Simone paid out of pocket, another chunk from the shrinking savings account. Innes's preliminary finding was brief and damning. The bodycam unit assigned to Officer Wade Pryor, badge number 741, has an average activation time of 22 seconds based on departmental IT logs from the preceding 6 months. The 2-minute activation gap on the recording from October 14th is inconsistent with normal hardware function and warrants further examination of the device's event log. 2 minutes was not a glitch. 2 minutes was a choice. And then there was Dr. Kenji Nakamura. Voss had obtained Brock Calloway's medical records as part of standard discovery. The records were extensive: surgical notes for the shoulder repair, imaging results for the rib fracture, dermatological assessment of the facial abrasions. Everything the prosecution needed to paint a picture of a victim who had been brutalized. But one page, buried in the intake notes, contained a detail that Underhill's report had not mentioned. Dr. Nakamura's initial examination notes, time-stamped 8:23 p.m. on October 14th, 41 minutes after the 911 call, included the following observation: patient presence with dislocated right shoulder, fractured fourth rib, facial abrasions consistent with ground contact. Also noted, lacerations to right palm and fingers of the right hand, consistent with grip on a sharp object. Patient states injuries resulted from a fall. Palm lacerations are inconsistent with fall mechanism. Laceration pattern suggests sustained grip on a bladed instrument. Brock had cuts on his hand, the hand that had held the knife. The emergency room doctor had seen them, documented them, and noted that they were inconsistent with Brock's claim of a fall. Detective Underhill had the medical records. He had access to every page, and he had chosen to include the shoulder, the rib, and the facial abrasions in his report, but not the palm lacerations. Voss called Simone. The ER doctor documented knife injuries on Calloway's hand. Underhill left them out of his report. Silence on the line. Not shock. Processing. What kind of lacerations? Palm and fingers of the right hand, consistent with gripping a blade. The doctor specifically noted they were inconsistent with a fall. So he was holding the knife, and the prosecution's own medical evidence proves it, and Underhill buried it. That's what it looks like. Add it to the Brady motion. Voss did. And then Terrence Boyle's article hit. 2 calls, 1 story. The 911 log that changes everything. Published in the Scottsdale Independent on December 3, page 1, above the fold. Boyle had obtained the call log through a public records request. Once the document was filed with the court, it became accessible, and had written a meticulous 1,200-word piece laying out the timeline. 7:38 p.m. Simone Grayfield calls 911 to report an armed robbery. 7:39 p.m. An anonymous caller reports a black female beating a white male. 7:41 p.m. Police arrive. Respond to the second call. Arrest Simone. The article did not editorialize. Boyle did not need to. The timeline spoke for itself. The woman who had called 911 to report being robbed at knife point was arrested based on an anonymous call that described the same event as an assault, and the prosecution had disclosed only the anonymous call in initial discovery. The article did not go viral. The Scottsdale Independent had a circulation of 22,000 and a digital readership that fluctuated between 15 and 30,000, depending on the news cycle. But it landed in the right places: defense attorneys' offices, the Maricopa County Public Defender's email listserv, and the social media feeds of people who had signed Pamela Dunning's petition. 14 petition signatures were withdrawn within 48 hours of publication. Pamela's response was immediate and furious. She posted on the Old Town Scottsdale Watch group, "The media is trying to make a criminal into a victim. I saw what I saw with my own eyes. A man was being beaten on the street. No amount of 911 call manipulation changes what I witnessed." 61 people liked the post, 23 shared it. 12 left comments ranging from supportive, "Stand your ground, Pamela," to hostile, "Maybe you should tell the whole truth about what you saw or didn't see." The comment section became a battlefield, and Craig Loomis, the owner of the mixed-use building whose security camera had recorded everything, received a subpoena on December 5th. His attorney responded on December 8th. The footage from the security camera system at the Loomis building, 114 North Goldwater Boulevard, for the date of October 14th, was automatically overwritten during a routine system update conducted on October 21st. The footage is no longer available. Overwritten. 7 days after the incident, before anyone had asked for it. Voss did not accept this. He hired Garrett Innes, the same forensics consultant who had analyzed the bodycam, to examine Loomis's security system. Innes asked for access to the hardware. Loomis's attorney refused. Innes asked for the system's technical specifications. Loomis's attorney provided them, reluctantly, and only after Voss filed a second motion to compel. What the specifications revealed was simple. The system backed up automatically to a cloud server every 72 hours. The backup on October 17th, 3 days after the incident, 4 days before the overwrite, would have captured the footage. Loomis had not mentioned the cloud backup. Voss filed a motion for a court order to access the cloud server. Loomis's attorney fought it, arguing privacy concerns and the burden of compliance. Judge Wellman scheduled the hearing for December 9th. Meanwhile, a woman named Jade drove from Tempe to Scottsdale to have dinner with Simone. They met at a quiet restaurant on Marshall Way, upscale enough to have cloth napkins, casual enough to not require reservations. Jade was in her late 20s, athletic, with close-cropped hair and the kind of posture that suggested she spent as much time in a gym as Simone did. They ordered without looking at the menu. Both knew what they wanted. Both ate with the focused economy of people for whom food was fuel rather than entertainment. "How are you holding up?" Jade asked. "I'm managing." "That's not what I asked." Simone set down her fork. "I'm angry. Not scared. Angry. The system is doing exactly what it's designed to do, and I'm watching it happen in slow motion." Jade reached across the table and touched her hand. Brief, professional. The kind of touch that carried respect rather than intimacy. "Ms. Grayfield." She used the name carefully, the way one might use a title. "Everyone at the gym is asking about you. They want to help. If you need anything, I need the footage from that building, and I need the body cam gaps explained, and I need the prosecutor to see the medical records that her own detective buried. Those are legal needs. I'm asking about you." "I'm the same person I've been for 10 years. I don't break easy." Jade smiled. "No, you don't." The waiter appeared to refill their water. "Are you two sisters?" Jade laughed. "She wishes. I'm just fortunate enough to work with her." The comment was light. The deference was not. Jade spoke about Simone the way a person speaks about someone they hold in genuine awe. Not a friend, not a peer, but someone whose abilities commanded a specific kind of respect. The waiter smiled politely, not understanding the undercurrent. Simone changed the subject. They talked for another hour. About the weather in Tempe. About a mutual acquaintance who had moved to Denver. About a scheduling conflict in November that Simone had resolved by phone 3 weeks earlier. They did not discuss the details of the case. They did not need to. Jade knew. She knew enough, and she knew better than to push. When they parted in the parking lot, Jade held Simone's gaze for a moment. "The November event was rescheduled. March, they're holding your spot." "I know. Will you be ready?" "I'll be ready." Jade nodded, got in her car, drove south toward Tempe. Simone stood in the parking lot for a moment, watching the taillights disappear. The November timeline. The March reschedule. The spot being held. Details of a life that no one in Scottsdale knew about. a life that existed in parallel to the one being dismantled, piece by piece, by a system that had decided who she was before asking. She got in her car, drove home, added Jade's visit to the notebook. Not the personal details, just the date, the restaurant, the duration. The notebook was not a diary. It was a record. And records, she had learned, were the only thing that survived when narratives collapsed. The December 9th hearing on the Loomis footage motion was 4 days away. The Brady hearing was 7 days after that. And somewhere in the Scottsdale Police Department's IT system, a bodycam event log sat in a database, waiting for someone to ask the right question about a 2-minute gap that was not a glitch. But on December 6th, 3 days before the hearing, 2 things happened that changed the trajectory of everything. The first, Simone received a call from Voss at 7:12 a.m. She was mid-stretch, hip flexors, the phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. "They want to talk." Voss's voice was tight, the sound of a man who had been up since 5. "The county attorney's office reached out, informally. They're suggesting we consider a plea." "A plea to what?" "Misdemeanor assault. Time served. No additional jail. Probation, community service, anger management course. In exchange, you waive your right to file civil claims related to the arrest." The offer was elegant in its cruelty. Accept the plea, and the case disappears. But so does Simone's ability to hold anyone accountable for what they did. The buried 911 call, the moved knife, the missing body cam footage, the omitted medical records, all of it becomes irrelevant, sealed, forgotten. "No. Simone, I have to advise you. No. I'm not pleading guilty to defending my own life. A misdemeanor plea with time served means no jail. It means this is over. It means they win. And it means the next person they do this to has no precedent to point to. No." Voss exhaled. "Okay. Then we go to war." The second thing that happened on December 6th was quieter, more dangerous. Simone came home from her evening run to find her front door ajar. Not broken, ajar. The deadbolt was intact. The frame was undamaged, but the door, which she locked every time she left without exception, was open by 2 inches. She did not go inside. She stood on the porch, gym bag over her shoulder, keys in her hand, and studied the gap. The interior was dark. The house smelled normal. No chemicals, no unfamiliar cologne, no disruption in the scent profile she knew by heart. But the door was open, and she had locked it. She walked back to her car, sat inside with the engine running, called Voss. "Someone was in my house." "What? Are you sure?" "The door was open. I lock it, always." "Did you go inside?" "No." "Good. Call the police." She almost laughed. Call the police. The same department that had arrested her for defending herself, buried her 911 call, moved the knife, fast-tracked an aggravated assault charge on an incomplete investigation. Call those police. "I'll handle it." "Simone, I'll handle it." She hung up, sat in the car for 11 minutes, watching the front door, cataloging the environment. Nothing moved. No lights came on. No vehicles she did not recognize on the street. Then she got out, walked to the porch, pushed the door open with her elbow, and entered the house in the practice sequence of someone who had been trained to clear rooms. Not by police, not by the military, but by someone who had taught her that entering an unfamiliar space required patience, angles, and the willingness to retreat. The house was empty. Nothing was missing. Nothing was obviously disturbed. But the notebook she kept in the drawer beside her bed, the one containing every date, every time, every quote, every badge number, every detail she had documented since the night of October 14th, was on top of the dresser. Not in the drawer. On top. Centered. As if someone had taken it out, read it, and placed it where she would see it. A message. Not written in words, written in placement. Written in the knowledge that they knew what she was doing, what she was recording, and that they could reach her whenever they wanted. Simone picked up the notebook, checked every page. Nothing was torn. Nothing was added. Nothing was crossed out. It was exactly as she had left it, except for its location. She placed it back in the drawer, took out her phone, photographed the dresser, the drawer, the door, the deadbolt, sent the images to an encrypted email address she had never shared with Voss. Then she sat on the edge of her bed, in the dark, and did something she had not done in 6 months. She opened the small leather case she had brought from Maryland. Inside was a laminated credential. Worn at the edges, the photo slightly faded, the text still legible. She looked at it for a long time, then closed the case, put it back in the drawer, and made a decision. She was done waiting. The hearing was in 3 days. The footage was on a cloud server that a judge was about to order unlocked. And the people who had entered her home, who had touched her notebook, who had tried to send a message, they had made the same mistake that everyone else had made. They had underestimated who she was. They had no idea how badly. End of Part 1. Part 2 begins. 3 days after someone walked into her house and moved her notebook, Simone Grayfield sat in the third row of courtroom 4C in the Maricopa County Superior Court building, wearing a navy blazer she had bought for $12 at a thrift store in Tempe, and watched a man in a $900 suit try to explain why security footage that his client claimed was destroyed still existed on a cloud server his client had never mentioned. The man in the suit was Gerald Fitch, attorney for Craig Loomis. Fitch was 57, thin, and spoke with the careful enunciation of someone billing $450 an hour. He stood at the lectern and addressed Judge Harold Wellman with the smooth confidence of a man who believed that legal language could make inconvenient facts disappear. Your Honor, my client's security system underwent a routine automated update on October 21st, which overwrote local storage. Mr. Loomis was not aware that a cloud backup existed. The system was installed and configured by a third-party vendor. My client is a property owner, not a technology expert. Voss stood at the opposing lectern. He held a single sheet of paper, the technical specification report from Garrett Innes. Your Honor, the system in question is a Simply Safe commercial package. The cloud backup feature is prominently described on page 1 of the user manual, which is provided at installation. Additionally, Mr. Loomis's account shows 14 months of cloud storage billing at $29.99 per month, charged to a credit card in his name. He has been paying for cloud backup since August of last year. Wellman looked at Fitch. Fitch did not look at Loomis, who was sitting in the gallery behind him, with the expression of a man watching his own credibility dissolve in real time. Mr. Fitch, your client has been paying for cloud storage for over a year and claims to be unaware of its existence? My client is elderly and does not manage his own billing statements. He's 61, and the credit card is in his name. Your Honor, the point remains. The point, Counselor, is that this court issued a subpoena for security footage, and your client's response omitted the existence of a backup that he has been paying for monthly. That is, at minimum, a failure of candor to the court. At maximum, it's obstruction. Fitch opened his mouth, closed it. The silence in the courtroom was the kind that costs clients money. The motion is granted, Wellman said. Mr. Loomis will provide full access credentials to the cloud backup server within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in contempt proceedings. And Mr. Fitch, advise your client that this court's patience for incomplete disclosures has been exhausted. The gavel came down. Simone exhaled through her nose. One small victory in a war that had been grinding for nearly 2 months. Outside the courthouse, Voss caught up to her on the steps. December 9th in Phoenix. 62 degrees, cloudless. The kind of winter day that felt like an insult to people fighting through darkness. 48 hours, he said. We'll have the footage by Wednesday. And if it shows what I know it shows, then we file for dismissal at the Brady hearing next week and bury this case. It won't be that simple. Why not? Because the footage doesn't just prove I'm innocent. It proves they knew I was innocent, and that's a different problem for them. A bigger one. People don't go quietly when you threaten to prove they lied. Voss studied her face. The same look he had given her a dozen times now. The look that said, you know things you shouldn't know, and I'm choosing not to ask why. He nodded once, turned toward the parking lot, and walked away with the slightly hunched posture of a man carrying 63 active cases and the growing suspicion that one of them was about to become the biggest of his career. The footage arrived on December 11th, 1 day ahead of the court-ordered deadline. Craig Loomis, facing the prospect of contempt charges, had decided that cooperation was cheaper than defiance. His cloud storage credentials were provided to Garrett Innes, who accessed the backup server from his office in Tempe and downloaded the relevant files in under 20 minutes. The video was 147 megabytes. Exterior camera, Loomis Building, 114 North Goldwater Boulevard. Date, October 14th. Duration, continuous recording from 6 p.m. to midnight. The segment that mattered was 4 minutes long. Innes called Voss. Voss called Simone. They met at Voss's office, a cramped room on the second floor of a strip mall on McDowell Road, with a window that looked out onto a tire shop and a desk buried under file folders. Voss plugged the drive into his laptop. Innes had already prepared a time-stamped transcript for the court filing, but Voss wanted to watch the raw footage first. Simone sat across from him. Her face was still. Her hands were in her lap. She already knew what the footage would show because she had lived it. But seeing it, Seeing the proof that the system had tried to bury was something else. The footage played. If you've been waiting for the moment that changes everything, this is it. Hit that like button now, because what this camera recorded is going to blow this case apart. The image was grainy but clear enough. A fixed wide-angle camera mounted above the building entrance, pointing south along the sidewalk. Streetlights provided ambient illumination. The timestamp ran in white text across the bottom of the frame. 7:36:42 seconds. A woman walked into frame from the bottom right, heading north along the sidewalk. Alone, purse over her left shoulder, stride relaxed, unhurried, no aggressive posture, no furtive movement, just a woman walking home. Simone watched herself on the screen, the grainy figure in the dark hoodie, the small body moving through pools of light and shadow. She looked ordinary. She looked like anyone. 7:37:1 second. A man entered the frame from the left, from the alley between Loomis's building and the adjacent structure. He was moving fast, not jogging, sprinting, closing the distance behind the woman with the flat-footed urgency of someone who had been waiting. 7:37:4 seconds. The man's right hand reached the woman's purse strap and yanked, hard. The woman stumbled slightly, turned. The man's other hand came up, and in the frame, unmistakable even in the grainy resolution, a blade caught the streetlight, small, metallic, angled forward, 7:37:6 seconds. The blade swept across the woman's left shoulder. The fabric of her hoodie tore visibly. She stepped to the left, off the line of attack. 7:37:8 seconds. The woman's hands moved, left hand to the man's right wrist, right hand underneath his elbow. The arm extended. The knife fell. It hit the concrete and bounced once, landing approximately 4 feet from the pair. 7:37:10 seconds. The woman's hip moved against the man's hip. He went down. She followed, establishing a mounted position, knees bracketing his torso. Her right hand controlled his wrist. Her left hand pressed his shoulder. 7:37:15 seconds. The man thrashed. The woman applied controlled pressure to his right shoulder. He screamed. The footage had no audio, but his mouth was open, his body arching, the pain visible in every pixel. She released pressure, but held position. 7:37:22 seconds. The woman's left hand reached into her own pocket, pulled out a phone. Her right hand maintained control of his wrist. She appeared to speak into the phone. That was it. 19 seconds from first contact to phone call. The entire encounter, the grab, the knife, the slash, the defense, the takedown, the restraint, the 911 call, captured in uninterrupted footage from an angle that left no room for interpretation. The screen kept playing. Officers arrived at 7:41. The woman released her hold, lay flat, was cuffed. The man was helped up. And the knife, visible on the concrete at 7:42:16 seconds, disappeared from its position after Officer Pryor's body moved across the frame. Voss closed the laptop. The office was quiet. The tire shop across the lot was running an air wrench that vibrated through the window glass, but inside the room, nothing moved. "That's your case," Simone said. "That's more than a case. That's an exoneration. It's also a conviction of Calloway and potentially of Pryor." Voss rubbed his eyes. He looked like a man who had been handed a winning lottery ticket and realized it was written on someone else's receipt. "I need to file this with the court immediately. The Brady hearing is December 16th. If I attach this footage to the motion, the prosecution's case collapses. File it, and request that the evidentiary hearing be expanded to address the bodycam discrepancy. The footage shows the knife in one position. Pryor's bodycam shows it in another. Those two recordings together prove evidence tampering. Simone, who are you?" The question had been building for weeks. Every conversation, every legal insight, every moment where she demonstrated knowledge that a woman who read contracts for a living should not have had, all of it had been accumulating behind that question. Voss did not ask it lightly. He asked it because the answer mattered, and he was beginning to suspect that the answer was bigger than anything he had anticipated. She looked at him, held his gaze for 3 seconds. "I'm your client, and right now, that's all that matters. File the motion." The Brady hearing on December 16th was supposed to be routine, a procedural argument about discovery obligations. It became something else entirely. Voss arrived with the Loomis footage, the complete 911 call log, Dr. Nakamura's medical notes highlighting the palm lacerations, and Garrett Innes's forensic analysis of the body cam activation gap. He laid it out piece by piece, in the methodical style of a man who usually handled plea negotiations and property disputes, but who had risen to this moment with a focus that surprised even himself. Assistant County Attorney Diane Prescott sat at the prosecution table with the careful stillness of someone watching a building she had constructed begin to lean. She objected 4 times. To the introduction of the footage, to the relevance of the medical notes, to the forensic report's admissibility, to the 911 log's completeness. Judge Wellman overruled everyone. "Ms. Prescott," Wellman said, after the footage had played on the courtroom's wall-mounted screen, "this court is looking at video evidence that directly contradicts the prosecution's theory of unprovoked assault. The defendant's 911 call, which was not disclosed in initial discovery, establishes that she reported an armed robbery 63 seconds before the anonymous call that prompted police response. The complainant's own medical records document lacerations on his palm consistent with gripping a bladed weapon. And the bodycam footage shows a 2-minute activation gap that your department's own IT specifications indicate is inconsistent with normal hardware function. Would the people like to respond?" Prescott stood. She was experienced enough to know that denial would make things worse. She chose the next best option, deflection. "Your Honor, the people take their discovery obligations seriously. The 911 call log was included in the full dispatch record provided to the defense. We acknowledge that the individual call breakdown was not separately highlighted, and we regret any confusion that may have caused. Regarding the security footage, this evidence was not available to the prosecution at the time of filing and was obtained through defense counsel's independent investigation. The people request a 48-hour continuance to review all newly presented materials." Granted. But Ms. Prescott, this court expects a substantive response, not a procedural one. If the people's case rests on evidence that has been contradicted by video, the court will entertain a motion to dismiss. "Understood, Your Honor." The gavel fell. 48 hours. 2 days for the prosecution to decide whether to fight a battle they had already lost or retreat and try to control the damage. Those 48 hours were among the longest of Simone's life. She spent them in her rental house, the one with the door that had been opened, the notebook that had been moved, the walls that no longer felt safe. She trained in the mornings at the commercial gym, working combinations on the heavy bag with a ferocity that made other members give her extra space. She reviewed the footage transcript in the afternoons, memorizing every timestamp, every movement, every frame that proved what she had known from the first second. She had done nothing wrong, and she waited for the phone to ring. It rang on December 18th. "Voss. The prosecution wants to deal. I already turned down one deal. This is different. They're not offering a plea. They're offering to drop the charges entirely, dismiss without prejudice. If you agree not to file a civil suit against the department for 1 year. Without prejudice means they can refile. Technically, yes. Practically, no. With the footage public and the Brady violations documented, any attempt to refile would be sanctioned. It's a face-saving measure. And the 1-year civil suit moratorium? They want time to conduct an internal review before any litigation forces their hand. Standard damage control language. Simone sat at her kitchen table. The notebook was open in front of her. Every entry, every date, every quote, every badge number. 71 days of documentation. 71 days of being treated like a criminal for the act of surviving. No deal. I want the charges dismissed. Period. No conditions. No moratorium. And I want the dismissal on the record with a statement from the court acknowledging the self-defense evidence. "Simone, that's aggressive. They charged me with aggravated assault for defending myself against a man with a knife. They buried my 911 call. They moved the knife. They hid the medical records. Someone broke into my house. And you want me to give them a 1-year grace period?" Silence on the line. Then Voss spoke, and his voice had changed, not softer, but clearer, as if he had finally stopped seeing her as a client and started seeing her as what she was. "I'll push for unconditional dismissal. But there's something else. The evidentiary hearing has been expanded. January 8th. Judge Wellman wants the proportionality question answered. On the record, with expert testimony. He's giving us the chance to explain how you did what you did. And Simone, I think it's time. Time for what? Time to answer the question everyone's been asking. How does a woman your size take down a man 60 pounds heavier with 2 moves and a joint lock? If we don't answer it, the prosecution will fill the silence with speculation. Trained fighter using lethal skills. Disproportionate force. Better we control the narrative. She closed her eyes. The thing she had protected for 4 months, the identity she had kept separate, hidden, compartmentalized, was about to become public. And once it was public, everything changed. The media, the attention, the scrutiny, the end of anonymity, which was the only thing that had made her life in Scottsdale bearable. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was letting them define her. Do it, but on my terms. Expert testimony first. The record speaks for itself. I'm not performing for anyone. Understood. I'll retain a sports medicine expert. Someone credible. Someone who can explain what the footage shows in language a judge can use. Dr. Alan Brightman. He's published extensively on combat sports biomechanics. Based in Tucson. His expert witness fee is $3,000. Voss paused. You know a sports medicine expert specializing in combat sports off the top of your head? I know many things, Nelson. Retain him. I'll cover the fee. The hearing was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare for the moment that would change everything. Simone used those weeks. She trained. Not at the commercial gym, at the facility in Tempe. For the first time in 2 months, she drove the 40 minutes south and walked through the doors of Guerrero's Academy, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu school where she had earned her black belt and where her coach, Professor Ramon Guerrero, had been waiting for her to come back. Guerrero was 62, compact, with the calm of a man who had spent 40 years teaching people to fight and had learned that the hardest fights happened outside the gym. He did not ask about the case. He did not ask about the charges. He handed her a GI, pointed to the mat, and said one word. Roll. She rolled for 90 minutes, sparred with 3 different partners, 2 men and 1 woman, all of them skilled, all of them pushing her. The rust was real. 2 months without serious training had dulled her timing by fractions of a second. Fractions that, in competition, meant the difference between winning and losing. But the technique was still there. The instincts were still there. The body remembered what the mind had been too stressed to practice. Afterward, she sat on the mat, sweat-soaked, breathing hard, and Guerrero sat beside her. March, he said. They're holding the title fight. I know. Will you be ready? I'll be ready. The body, yes. But the head? She looked at him. He was the only person in the world who had ever asked her that question and meant it. Not as a therapeutic exercise, not as a wellness check, but as a technical assessment. Was her mental game intact? Could she compete at the highest level with 4 months of institutional violence sitting on her shoulders? The head needs work, she admitted. But I've fought through worse. Guerrero nodded. Did not push. That was his way. Open the door, let the student walk through it or not. He stood, offered her a hand, and pulled her to her feet. Come back tomorrow, and the day after. Every day until the hearing. She did. Every day for 21 days. And with each session, something returned. Not just speed and timing, but the clarity of purpose that had been eroded by 71 days of being treated as something she was not. January 8th, the Maricopa County Superior Court Building. Courtroom 4, C9:17 a.m. The courtroom was fuller than it had been for any previous hearing. Word had spread, through Terrence Boyle's reporting, through the legal community's whisper network, through the particular gravity that attaches to cases where something dramatic is about to happen. The gallery held 41 people, reporters, law students, community members, and a row of Scottsdale PD officers in civilian clothes whose presence suggested that the department was paying close attention. Captain Margot Stelling sat in the back row, arms crossed, face unreadable. She had not attended previous hearings. Her presence today said everything about what the department expected to happen. Judge Wellman entered. Everyone rose. He took his seat with the economy of a man who had done this 10,000 times and intended to do it 10,000 more. This is an evidentiary hearing in the matter of the state of Arizona versus Simone Denise Grayfield, case number CR-2024-4721. The court has reviewed the defense's supplemental filings, including security camera footage, the complete 911 call log, medical records, and forensic analysis of law enforcement bodycam recordings. The purpose of today's hearing is to address the outstanding question of proportionality in the defendant's claim of self-defense under ARS, Section 13-404. Mr. Voss, you may proceed. Voss stood. He was wearing his best suit, the one he reserved for trials, not hearings, and he moved to the lectern with a steadiness that suggested he had rehearsed this moment in front of his bathroom mirror. Your Honor, the defense moves to admit Exhibit D14 through the testimony of Dr. Alan Brightman, a board-certified sports medicine physician with specialization in combat athletics. Objection. Prescott rose. The people were not given adequate notice of this expert's testimony. Ms. Prescott, the expert was disclosed in supplemental filings on December 28th, 11 days ago. That exceeds the 10-day minimum under Rule 15.1. Overruled. Proceed, Mr. Voss. Dr. Alan Brightman took the stand. He was 54, gray-haired, soft-spoken, with the academic bearing of someone who had spent more time in research libraries than in courtrooms, but who was comfortable in both. His curriculum vitae ran to 6 pages. sports medicine faculty at the University of Arizona, published author of 3 peer-reviewed studies on biomechanics of combat sports injuries, expert witness in 11 prior cases involving use of force analysis. Voss walked him through the footage, frame by frame, timestamp by timestamp. Brightman narrated each movement with the clinical precision of a man describing a surgical procedure. At 7:37, 8 seconds, the female subject, Ms. Grayfield, executes what is commonly known as an arm drag to wrist control transition. Her left hand captures the male subject's right wrist from the outside, while her right hand applies upward pressure to the elbow joint. This redirects the knife arm away from her body and hyperextends the elbow past its comfortable range of motion. The male subject releases the knife, an involuntary response to joint pressure, not a voluntary choice. This technique is standard in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and is taught as a weapon disarm in most credentialed self-defense programs. At 7:37, 10 seconds, Ms. Grayfield executes a hip sweep, specifically an ogoshi variant, where her hip serves as the fulcrum point to rotate the male subject's center of gravity past the tipping point. The male subject falls backward. The female subject follows him to the ground and establishes a mounted control position, knees on either side of the torso, weight distributed to prevent the subject from rolling or escaping. At 7:37, 12 seconds, Ms. Grayfield applies a Kimura lock to the male subject's right shoulder, a joint manipulation that rotates the humerus behind the plane of the scapula. The Kimura is a compliance technique. Its purpose is to induce pain sufficient to stop resistance. It is not designed to cause dislocation. The fact that the subject's shoulder dislocated indicates that he resisted the hold rather than complying. He pulled against the pressure instead of yielding. The dislocation was a consequence of his resistance, not of excessive force by Ms. Grayfield. Wellman interrupted. Doctor, in your professional assessment, did the defendant use more force than was necessary to neutralize the threat? Brightman leaned slightly toward the microphone. No, Your Honor. In my assessment, Ms. Grayfield used the minimum force necessary. She did not strike the complainant in the face, head, or torso. She did not choke, kick, or stomp. She did not use any weapon. She used grappling techniques, holds and joint manipulations, designed specifically to control a person without causing unnecessary injury. For someone with her level of training, this was remarkable restraint. Her level of training, Wellman repeated. Elaborate. This was the moment. Voss held up a single sheet of paper. Your Honor, the defense submits Exhibit D15, the official athlete registry entry for Simone Denise Grayfield. He read it into the record, every word landing like a stone in still water. Bellator Mixed Martial Arts, official athlete registry, Simone Denise Grayfield. Date of birth, March 15, 1993. Weight class, flyweight, 125 pounds. Professional record, 14 wins, 1 loss. Current status, reigning champion. Title 1. April 6, 2024. Bellator 299, unanimous decision. Disciplines: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, black belt under Professor Ramon Guerrero. Muay Thai, 16 amateur bouts. Collegiate wrestling, All-American, University of Maryland. The courtroom did not gasp. That was the movies. What happened was worse. A silence so complete that the HVAC system's hum became the loudest sound in the room. 41 people processed the same information simultaneously, and the collective recalculation was almost audible. The woman they had been discussing for 3 months, the woman Pamela Dunning had called violent, the woman Captain Stelling had fast-tracked for prosecution, the woman who had been arrested and charged and fingerprinted and held in a cell and made to post $25,000 in bail, was a professional champion. A professional champion who had defended herself against a man with a knife using the least amount of force she was capable of. Wellman set down the document, looked at Prescott. Does the prosecution wish to cross-examine? Prescott stood slowly. She had the expression of a woman choosing between bad options and finding that all of them led to the same place. No questions for this witness, Your Honor. Very well. Dr. Brightman, you are excused. Wellman turned to the gallery. This court will take a 20-minute recess. When we reconvene, I expect both parties prepared to address the motion to dismiss. The recess lasted 23 minutes. During those 23 minutes, 4 things happened. First, Terrence Boyle, sitting in the second row of the gallery, sent a text to his editor at the Scottsdale Independent. Story of the year, need front page, above the fold. Reigning MMA champion, charged with assault for defending herself against armed robbery. I have the courtroom transcript and the footage. Second, 2 of the plainclothes Scottsdale PD officers in the gallery left the courtroom and did not return. Third, Captain Margot Stelling made a phone call from the hallway. She spoke for 90 seconds. The words were not audible. her expression was. Fourth, Simone Grayfield walked to the women's restroom, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her forehead against the cool metal of the partition. She did not cry. She pressed her hands flat against the walls on either side and breathed 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, the same breathing pattern she used in the final 30 seconds before a fight, the moment between the cage door closing and the referee's signal, the moment when everything else falls away and all that remains is what you have trained yourself to be. She had been hiding for 4 months, living small, moving quiet, absorbing the daily indignities of a system that had decided she was guilty before asking a single question. And now the secret was out, and there was no going back to the woman who jogged through Old Town at 5 a.m. and ordered black coffee and let strangers question her credit card without responding. That woman was gone. What remained was the truth. She washed her hands, fixed her blazer, walked back into the courtroom. If this reveal just gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe, because the justice cascade is just getting started, and you do not want to miss what happens next. When the hearing reconvened, Voss moved to dismiss under ARS Section 13-404. Prescott did not oppose. Her exact words, "The people do not object to dismissal at this time." Wellman's ruling was brief and devastating. The court finds that the evidence presented, including security camera footage, the complete 911 call log, medical records, and expert testimony, establishes by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant acted in lawful self-defense against an armed attacker. The charges of aggravated assault under ARS Section 13-1204 are hereby dismissed. This dismissal is entered with prejudice. With prejudice, not without. With. Meaning the charges could never be refiled. Wellman had overridden the prosecution's preferred face-saving language and slammed the door shut permanently. He was not finished. The court also notes with concern the discovery failures identified in the defense's Brady motion. The prosecution's initial disclosure omitted the defendant's own 911 call, medical records documenting knife grip lacerations on the complainant's hands, and the existence of security camera footage that was the subject of delayed subpoena and contested production. These omissions are troubling. The court refers the matter to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office of Professional Responsibility for review. The gavel fell. Case number CR-2024-4721 was closed. Simone sat perfectly still. Voss leaned over, said something she did not hear. The gallery buzzed. Reporters scribbled. Stelling was gone, her seat in the back row empty. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the aftermath unfolded in layers. Prescott walked past Simone without making eye contact. Her heels clicked on the marble floor with the precise rhythm of someone holding herself together through sheer professional discipline. She turned the corner toward the elevator bank and was gone. Voss stood beside Simone near the courtroom doors, fielding calls on his phone while simultaneously trying to have a conversation with her. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the particular adrenaline crash that follows a victory you did not fully believe would happen. They might appeal the with prejudice language. Wellman went further than they expected. Let them try. And the Brady referral, that's going to trigger an internal review at the county attorney's office. Prescott's supervisor will have to answer for the discovery failures. Good. Terrence Boyle appeared from the gallery, notebook in hand, press credential visible. He approached with the measured caution of a reporter who wanted a quote but respected the moment. Ms. Grayfield, Terrence Boyle, Scottsdale Independent, we've been covering your case since October. Would you be willing to comment on the ruling? Simone looked at him. This was the man who had published the 911 story, who had written, "She moved like someone who's been in a cage before," in a notebook he thought no one would ever read. His reporting had helped. His curiosity had mattered. But she was not ready to be a story. Not yet. Not today. Understood. If you change your mind... He held out a business card. She took it, put it in her pocket, did not promise to call. Outside on the courthouse steps, Captain Stelling was giving an impromptu statement to 2 local television reporters. Simone paused at the top of the stairs, close enough to hear. The department respects the court's ruling and will conduct a thorough internal review. No further comment at this time. One reporter pressed, "Captain, the defense presented evidence that an officer's body cam was remotely paused during the initial encounter. Can you explain how that's possible?" Stelling's expression did not change. "I'm not going to comment on evidence that's part of an ongoing internal investigation. The department takes body cam integrity seriously, and any irregularities will be addressed through appropriate channels." Does this case raise concerns about racial profiling in the Scottsdale Police Department? This department does not profile based on race, period. Stelling turned and walked down the steps, escorted by a public information officer who materialized at her elbow like a bodyguard. As Stelling passed Simone at the top of the stairs, their eyes met. 3 seconds, no words. But the exchange carried weight. Two women on opposite sides of an institutional divide, each measuring the other. Stelling's expression was controlled, professional, unreadable. But her jaw was tight, and the tendons in her neck stood out like cables, and there was something in her eyes that was not anger or contempt, but something closer to calculation. The look of a person who has lost a battle and is already planning the next one. Simone held her gaze until Stelling looked away. Then she walked down the steps into the January sunlight. Outside the courthouse, the January sun was sharp and clean. Simone stood on the sidewalk and felt it on her face, and for a moment, just a moment, the weight lifted. Not entirely, not permanently, but enough that she could breathe without counting the seconds. Then her phone rang. Then Voss's phone rang. Then the cameras arrived. Boyle's article hit the Scottsdale Independent's website at 2:14 p.m. Champion Defender, how Scottsdale PD charged a robbery victim. By 4 p.m., it had been picked up by the Associated Press. By 6 p.m., it was on CNN's website. By 9 p.m., Simone Grayfield's name was trending on 3 social media platforms. The story was irresistible. A professional MMA champion, minding her own business on a Scottsdale sidewalk, robbed at knife point, defends herself using minimum force, gets arrested and charged with aggravated assault, while the robber is treated as the victim. A buried 911 call, a moved knife, a 2-minute body cam gap, a property owner who hid security footage. 4 months of prosecution based on incomplete evidence, and one woman's 15-second glimpse from a boutique window. The media wanted interviews. Simone declined everyone. The social media conversation exploded in the way social media conversations do. Half outrage, half exploitation, all of it moving at a speed that left nuance behind. Pamela Dunning's petition was screenshot and shared as evidence of racial bias. Her boutique's website was flooded with 1-star reviews. Her Facebook post, "The media is trying to make a criminal into a victim," was circulated millions of times. Pamela deleted the petition. She did not apologize. She closed her boutique for 3 days, citing threats. When she reopened, a new sign hung in the window. Serving Old Town since 2011, community first. The word community had not changed its meaning in her vocabulary, just its volume. On January 20th, Boyle published a follow-up profile on Pamela. Not an attack piece. Boyle was too careful for that. But a factual accounting of her role in the case. He documented her petition, her television interview, her Facebook posts. He noted that her eyewitness statement covered only the final 15 seconds of the encounter. He quoted her original police statement, "I did not observe any weapon." He placed it alongside the footage showing the knife clearly visible in Brock's hand. Pamela's attorney sent a cease and desist letter to the Scottsdale Independent. Boyle's editor, a 63-year-old woman named Ruth Kimball, who had been running the paper for 22 years, responded with 4 words, "See you in court." The cease and desist was withdrawn. But Pamela's story illustrated something more important than one woman's bias. It illustrated how a 15-second observation, filtered through assumptions that predated the event itself, could become the foundation of a criminal prosecution. Pamela had not lied. She had told the truth as she saw it. The problem was that what she saw was shaped by everything she believed before she looked out that window. And what she believed was that a black woman in Old Town Scottsdale, in physical contact with a white man, must be the aggressor. No law could fix that. No verdict could undo it. It was the machinery beneath the machinery, the operating system that ran silently beneath the visible interface of courts and statutes and due process. And it would still be running long after Simone's case was closed and Pamela's boutique reopened, and the petition was deleted and the news cycle moved on. Meanwhile, the system began its slow, practiced routine of self-protection. On January 15th, 1 week after the dismissal, Captain Margot Stelling held a press conference. She stood behind a podium with the Scottsdale PD logo and the American flag and spoke with the controlled cadence of someone who had been media trained. The Scottsdale Police Department takes all allegations of procedural irregularity seriously. In light of the court's findings in the Grayfield matter, the department has initiated an internal review of evidence handling protocols and body cam management procedures. Officer Wade Pryor has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal affairs investigation. This action reflects our commitment to accountability and does not constitute a finding of wrongdoing. Administrative leave. Not suspension, not termination, not arrest. Leave with pay, with union representation, with the presumption of innocence that the department had not extended to Simone. Detective Ferris Underhill received a written reprimand. The formal language read, "Incomplete compliance with discovery obligations in case number CR-2024-4721. No suspension, no criminal referral. He was reassigned from the Major Crimes Unit to administrative duties, a lateral move that carried professional embarrassment but no material consequence. He continued to draw his full salary. Captain Stelling herself faced no disciplinary action. The department's internal review concluded that she had followed established protocol in approving the charging recommendation based on the investigative report provided to her office. Protocol had not required her to independently verify the evidence. Protocol had not required her to question whether a complete picture had been assembled. Protocol, it turned out, was designed to diffuse responsibility so thoroughly that nobody was responsible for anything. Craig Loomis was referred to the county attorney's office for potential obstruction, failing to disclose the cloud backup server in response to a lawful subpoena. The investigation was opened. Then it sat. Loomis retained Gerald Fitch, who filed a motion arguing that his client's non-disclosure was the result of genuine ignorance, not intentional concealment. The motion was pending. The investigation was pending. Everything was pending. And Brock Calloway, the man who had started all of it with a folding knife and a grab on a dark street, faced a reckoning of his own. On January 22nd, the date that had originally been set for Simone's trial, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed charges against Brock Avery Calloway, armed robbery under ARS. Section 13-1902, a Class 3 felony, and assault with a deadly weapon under ARS Section 13-1204, a Class 3 felony. Combined, the charges carried a potential sentence of 7 to 21 years. But there was a complication. 2 weeks before the charges were filed, Brock's public defender had negotiated a proffer session, a formal meeting where Brock provided information in exchange for consideration, with the legal protection that his own statements could not be used directly against him. What Brock said in that proffer session reached Voss through a legal channel that was not quite privileged and not quite public, the kind of information transfer that happens between defense attorneys who understand that sometimes the truth needs a push. The proffer took place in a conference room at the county attorney's office. Beige walls, a rectangular table, a digital recorder, and 4 people: Brock, his public defender, a prosecutor from the felony division, and a paralegal taking notes. Brock arrived in civilian clothes, his right arm still in a sling, his face carrying the particular pallor of a man who had spent 3 months realizing that the people who told him to lie were not going to protect him from the consequences. His statement was halting, rehearsed but fractured, the way confessions are when the person giving them is more afraid of the truth than the lie. The officer who arrived first, the one who cuffed the woman, he came over to me while the paramedics were working on my shoulder. I was on the stretcher. He leaned in close, like he was checking on me, you know. But then he said, "Tell them she attacked you first. Don't mention the knife. If you stick with that, the knife won't matter." And I asked, "What about the knife?" And he said, "We'll handle the knife." He said it like he was coaching me, like this was something he'd done before, like he already knew the script. The prosecutor asked whether anyone else was present during this exchange. Brock said Officer Ruiz was nearby, but her back was turned, helping the second paramedic with equipment. The prosecutor asked if Brock had any corroborating evidence. Brock did not. Only his word. The word of a man facing 2 felony charges who had every incentive to shift blame. But then Brock added something that was not in the script his own attorney had prepared. "There's one more thing. When the officer, Pryor, when he leaned in, he had his body cam on his chest. I could see the red light. It was off. The camera was off. I remember thinking, that's weird, because isn't it supposed to be on all the time? But I didn't say anything because he was helping me. Or I thought he was helping me. The camera was off, during the exact window that the IT logs showed as a remote pause. Brock's observation, offered unprompted, aligned precisely with the forensic evidence that neither he nor his attorney had access to. Pryor's attorney, provided by the police union, issued a statement within hours. Officer Pryor categorically denies coaching any witness or manipulating recording equipment. Mr. Calloway's proffer statement is self-serving and should be evaluated in the context of a criminal defendant seeking leniency. The denial was expected. The speed of the denial was instructive. Someone had been watching, someone had been prepared. But the proffer opened a door that Internal Affairs Sergeant Anita Morales had been waiting for. Between the hearing and the formal dismissal, Simone experienced one more act of physical intimidation. this one bolder than the parking lot encounter and more dangerous. On January 12th, 4 days after the courtroom reveal, she was loading groceries into her car at the Safeway on Shea Boulevard, the same store where a security guard named Garrett had once followed her through the aisles. The parking lot was half full, mid-afternoon, the kind of anonymous public space where nothing notable ever happened. A dark blue pickup truck, the same make and color as the one Derek Calloway had been leaning against weeks earlier, pulled into the space directly behind her car. Not beside it, behind it, blocking her exit. A man got out. Not Derek. Someone she had not seen before. Mid-40s, heavy-set, wearing a polo shirt with a logo she did not recognize, and sunglasses that covered half his face. He walked toward her with the unhurried pace of someone who wanted to be noticed. Simone Grayfield? She set the grocery bag in the trunk. Did not close it. Kept the trunk lid between herself and the man. A barrier, thin but better than nothing. Her weight shifted to the balls of her feet. Her hands stayed visible. Who's asking? A friend of the department. Just wanted to say, congratulations on the hearing. Must feel good to humiliate the people who keep this city safe. Move your truck. I'm just talking. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell chewing tobacco and aftershave. You think this is over? You think getting charges dropped means you won? The guys in that department have families, mortgages, kids in school. And you're out here playing victim, trying to get them fired. Move your truck. He reached forward. Not a punch, not a grab, but a shove. Open palm against her left shoulder, hard enough to push her back a step, hard enough to leave a red mark that would be visible for an hour. The contact was deliberate, calibrated, just enough to threaten, not quite enough to justify arrest, or so he believed. What he did not know, what he could not know, was that the woman he had just put his hands on had 14 professional fights, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and reflexes drilled over 10,000 hours of combat training. What happened next took 2 seconds. She caught his extended wrist with her left hand, stepped laterally, rotated his arm outward, palm up, elbow locked, applying just enough torque to hyperextend the joint without dislocating it. He yelped, a sharp involuntary sound, and went up on his toes to relieve the pressure. I'm being recorded. Her voice was flat. Her phone was in her right hand, camera facing him, the red dot indicating video. She had pressed the record button the moment he got out of the truck. Your license plate is on camera. Your face is on camera. And if you touch me again, I will file assault charges and provide this footage to the Scottsdale Independent, which has been very interested in my story. She released his arm. He stumbled back. His sunglasses had slipped sideways on his face, revealing eyes that were wide with something between pain and shock. He had expected her to flinch, to cower, to absorb the push the way he assumed women absorbed pushes. Silently, fearfully, without consequence. He had picked the wrong woman. He returned to his truck without a word, reversed out of the space. The engine revved, one last gesture of impotent aggression, and the truck disappeared onto Shea Boulevard. Simone saved the video, sent it to Voss, sent a copy to the encrypted email address. Then she finished loading her groceries, closed the trunk, and drove home with steady hands. Voss filed the report that evening. The Scottsdale PD response. The complaint has been documented. Without identification of the individual, investigative options are limited. The license plate, which Simone had captured clearly on video, was registered to a leasing company that serviced fleet vehicles for multiple businesses, including, Voss would discover weeks later through a public records request, the Scottsdale Police Officers Association. Morales was 41, careful, and possessed the particular determination of someone who had been investigating police misconduct for 8 years and had learned that the system almost always found ways to protect its own. She did not expect the prior investigation to result in criminal charges. She did not expect justice to be swift or complete. She expected to do her job, document what she found, and let the record speak. What she found in the bodycam IT logs changed everything. Voss received the forensic analysis from Garrett Innes on February 3rd. Innes had been granted access to the Scottsdale PD's bodycam management system through a court order that Wellman had approved over the department's strenuous objection. The analysis was technical, detailed, and damning. The bodycam unit assigned to Officer Pryor, serial number SPD-BC-741, had an event log that recorded every state change: activation, deactivation, pause, resume, battery status, connectivity. On October 14th, the log showed 7:40 p.m., 12 seconds, unit activated, normal startup sequence, activation time 21 seconds, 7:40, 33 seconds, unit recording. 7:41, 4 seconds. Unit paused. Command source, remote. Authorization level, supervisor. 7:43, 8 seconds. Unit resumed. Command source, remote. Authorization level, supervisor. The 2-minute gap was not an activation delay. It was not a hardware malfunction. It was a deliberate, remote pause, initiated by someone with supervisor-level access to the bodycam management system. Pryor did not have supervisor access. His authorization level was standard. Someone above him, someone with the credentials to remotely control bodycam units, had paused his camera during the exact 2 minutes when officers first arrived on scene, when the knife was visible, when the initial interaction with Simone and Brock occurred. The question was, who? The supervisor access log showed that the pause command originated from credential set SPD-SUP-019. Innes requested the department's credential assignment records to identify whose account that was. The department's response: credential assignment records are maintained by the IT division and are subject to personnel privacy protections. A separate court order would be required for disclosure. Another wall. Another delay. Another layer of institutional protection. Voss filed for the court order. The hearing was set for March. The wheels continued to turn at the speed of bureaucracy. But Voss also did something else. On February 7th, he filed a complaint with the United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. The complaint was 12 pages long and alleged deliberate suppression of exculpatory evidence, race-based presumption of guilt during the arrest and investigation of Simone Grayfield, evidence tampering at the scene of the incident, obstruction of discovery obligations, and unauthorized manipulation of law enforcement recording equipment. The DOJ's response arrived by certified mail on February 19th. Simone read it in Voss's office, standing because she was too restless to sit. United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Acknowledgement of Complaint, reference number CRD-2025-00417. This office has received your complaint regarding potential violations of federal civil rights statutes by members of the Scottsdale Police Department. A preliminary review will be conducted to determine whether the allegations warrant a full investigation under the department's authority. Please note that the review process typically requires 6 to 12 months. You will be notified of any determination regarding further investigation. 6 to 12 months. The federal government investigating whether her rights had been violated would take longer than the violation itself. That's it, she said. That's the process, Voss replied. Federal civil rights investigations are slow. They're also thorough. And they carry consequences that local IA investigations don't. Pattern or practice findings, consent decrees, federal oversight. If the DOJ determines there's a systemic problem, it doesn't just punish individuals, it restructures departments. If, she set the letter down, looked out the window at the tire shop and the strip mall parking lot, and the flat Arizona horizon that went on forever without promising anything. I'm leaving Scottsdale, she said. For good? For now. There's a title fight in March. I need to train. I can't do that here, not with cameras outside my house and reporters calling my landlord. Where will you go? Back to Tempe, Guerrero's Academy. There's housing nearby. Voss nodded. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Thin, the kind that held a single document. Before you go, the county attorney's office sent their final position this morning. Charges dismissed with prejudice. No conditions, no moratorium on civil claims. They folded completely. Good. And Simone, for what it's worth, I'm sorry it took this long. She looked at him. Nelson Voss, public defender, 63 cases on his docket, coffee stains on his car seats, a man who had not slept more than 5 hours a night since November. He had not been perfect. He had been stretched thin and under-resourced and sometimes too cautious, but he had not stopped. He had filed the motions, pushed the subpoenas, hired the forensics consultant, and stood up in a courtroom and read the truth into the record when the truth was the only thing between her and a felony conviction. You did your job, Nelson. That's not nothing. It's not enough. It never is. That's the system. But you showed up. Some people don't. She left his office, walked into the February sunshine. Phoenix at 2 in the afternoon, 70 degrees, the kind of warmth that should have felt like freedom, but carried the aftertaste of everything that had happened in the 4 months since a man had grabbed her purse on a Scottsdale sidewalk. The days that followed were a strange kind of aftermath. The legal machinery ground forward on its own schedule, Brock's case proceeding through the preliminary hearing phase, Pryor's IA investigation ongoing, the DOJ complaint under review, the Loomis obstruction referral pending. Every thread still connected, none of them resolved. Simone returned to Guerrero's academy full-time. The training was punishing, not because Guerrero pushed her beyond her limits, but because 4 months of diminished preparation had created deficits that only repetition could fix. Her timing was off by fractions of a second. Her cardio had dropped below competition standard. Her weight had fluctuated. Stress eating during the worst weeks of the case had added 4 pounds that she needed to cut before March. On her 3rd day back, she sparred with a woman named Keiko, a flyweight contender ranked 7th in the world, who trained at Guerrero's during fight camp rotations. Keiko was fast, technical, and unforgiving. She caught Simone with a leg kick in the 2nd round that buckled her right knee and sent her to the mat. Simone lay on the canvas, staring at the gym's exposed ceiling beams, and for the first time in months felt something that was not anger or anxiety or the controlled stillness she had maintained throughout the case. She felt relief. This was pain she understood. Clean pain, honest pain, the kind that came from competition between equals, not from a system that had decided she was guilty before she spoke a single word. She got up, reset her stance, finished the round. Guerrero watched from the corner, arms folded, expression neutral. After the session, he approached with a bottle of water and a piece of advice. "You're fighting angry. That works for 2 rounds. It doesn't work for 5. I know. You need to separate. The case is the case. The cage is the cage. If you bring one into the other, you lose both." She knew he was right. She also knew that separating was easier said than done when the case had taken 4 months of her life, depleted her savings, cost her a title defense, and left her with a recording of a man shoving her in a parking lot and the knowledge that someone with supervisor credentials had pressed pause on a bodycam to help frame her for a crime she did not commit. But she trained. Every day, 6 hours minimum. Grappling in the morning, striking in the afternoon, conditioning in the evening. The rhythm of preparation gradually overriding the rhythm of survival. Her timing came back. Her cardio rebuilt. The 4 pounds dropped. The woman who entered the gym each morning looked less like someone enduring and more like someone preparing. On February 4th, Bellator officially announced the title fight. Simone Grayfield versus Nina Volkov. March 7th, Bellator 308, Mohegan Sun Arena, Connecticut. The promotion's press release mentioned the Scottsdale case in 1 paragraph. Carefully worded, legally vetted, just enough context to drive pay-per-view interest without turning the fight into a spectacle. Simone read the press release in Guerrero's office, set it down, looked at him. "They're going to use the case to sell tickets." "Of course they are. Does that bother you?" "It bothers me that I can't control the narrative. Everyone's going to see me as the woman who got arrested, not the woman who got robbed. Then win the fight. Winners control their own stories." She packed her rental house on February 9th. 6 boxes. Everything she owned. The lease had 4 months left, but her landlord, Mr. Wyand, agreed to release her without penalty, motivated less by sympathy than by the desire to stop receiving calls from reporters asking whether he rented to assault defendants. The morning she loaded the car, the neighbor from 2 houses down, the same woman who had confronted her in the driveway in October, rolled newspaper in hand, voice tight with concern, appeared on the sidewalk. She stood there for a moment, watching Simone carry boxes from the front door to the trunk. Then she walked over. "I saw the news, about the hearing, about who you are." Simone set the box down, waited. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for what I said before. When I came to your driveway and said we didn't want trouble, I didn't know the whole story. You didn't ask." The words were not harsh, they were factual. The woman flinched anyway. She stood there on the curb, looking at Simone the way people look at someone they have wronged and cannot undo. Not with fear, not with hostility, but with the specific discomfort of recognition. "You're right, I didn't." She paused. "My daughter watched the footage. She's 14. She told me I should be ashamed. She said if someone tried to rob her, she'd want to fight back, and nobody should go to jail for that." "Your daughter's right." The woman nodded, stepped back, turned and walked to her house without another word. Simone watched her go, added nothing to the notebook. This conversation did not need to be documented. It needed to be remembered, not as evidence, but as a reminder that some people change slowly and some did not change at all, and you could not control which was which. She loaded the last boxes into her Civic, stood in the empty living room for a moment. The bed was stripped, the kitchen was clean. The drawer where the notebook had lived was empty, the notebook itself locked in the trunk of her car, along with the small leather case from Maryland. Jade arrived at 10 a.m. to help with the move. They loaded the last box in silence. "You coming back to Tempe?" "For now, I need to train." "March 7th. That's 26 days. "I know." Jade leaned against the car. "The gym's been getting calls, media, fans, people who saw the footage and want to sign up for classes." "I'm not teaching classes." "I know, but they're asking, and the attention—" "It's not all bad, Simone. People are seeing what happened. The story is out there." Simone closed the trunk, looked at the rental house, the small windows, the east-facing wall, the front door that she had locked every single time she left and that someone had opened anyway. "I keep thinking about that footage," she said. "Not the robbery. The part where Pryor steps in front of the camera. 2 seconds. That's all it took. He saw the knife. He knew it was there. And in 2 seconds he made a decision. Not to document it, not to secure it, but to hide it. 2 seconds to decide that the story he wanted to tell was more important than the truth." Jade was quiet. "And then someone with supervisor access paused the body cam," Simone continued, "remotely, from wherever they were sitting. They watched the feed, or they got a call, or they followed a protocol that nobody wrote down but everybody understood. And they pressed pause. 2 minutes. And in those 2 minutes, the whole story changed. The investigation will find out who... The investigation will take months. And then there will be a hearing. And then an appeal. And then a settlement, probably. And the person who pressed that button will retire with a pension and a non-disclosure agreement, and nobody will ever say their name out loud." The bitterness in her voice was new. Not anger. She had been angry for months. This was something colder. The recognition that the system she had endured was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. "So what do you do?" Jade asked. Simone opened the driver's door, sat down, placed her hands on the wheel. "I fight. It's what I've always done. Different cage, same principle. You absorb the damage, you wait for the opening, and when it comes, you don't hesitate." She started the engine. Jade climbed into the passenger seat. They drove south on Scottsdale Road, past the coffee shop where a barista had asked if she was visiting, past the Safeway where a security guard had followed her through the aisles, past the corner of Goldwater and 2nd, where a man with a knife had changed her life, and she had changed his. The Loomis Building's security camera was still mounted above the entrance. Its red recording light was on, recording everything, recording nothing that mattered, because footage only mattered if someone watched it. They merged onto the 101 heading south toward Tempe. The city fell away behind them. Ahead, the road stretched flat and straight into a distance that looked like possibility, but felt like an open question. 2 weeks later, Simone was at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, Terminal 4, Gate B7. A flight to Baltimore, connecting through Dallas. She was going east for 10 days, visiting her mother, handling paperwork, closing out the remnants of a Maryland life she had left behind 18 months earlier. The title fight was 26 days away. Guerrero had approved the trip on the condition that she maintain conditioning, running, bodyweight circuits, shadow work, and returned by February 23rd to begin the final 2-week fight camp. She had agreed. She needed the break. Not from training, but from Arizona. From the dry heat and the flat horizon and the weight of a place where everyone now knew her name for reasons she had never chosen. The TSA line moved slowly. She stood between a family with 3 children and a man in a business suit who kept checking his watch as if time could be bullied into moving faster. She wore her gym bag over one shoulder, her phone in her back pocket, her hair pulled up under a cap that obscured most of her face. She had learned in the 2 weeks since the hearing that anonymity was gone. Not the dangerous kind of recognition she had experienced during the case. The hostile stares, the driveway confrontations, the parking lot intimidation. This was different. People looked at her with curiosity now instead of suspicion, some with admiration, some with the particular hunger of strangers who believed that proximity to someone famous conferred something valuable. She had not adjusted to any of it. At the security checkpoint, a TSA agent scanned her boarding pass and glanced at her face, then glanced again. "Have a good flight, ma'am," the agent said, with a half smile that said, "I know who you are, but I'm professional enough not to make it weird." "Thank you." She placed her bag on the conveyor belt, walked through the body scanner, collected her belongings on the other side. Routine. The kind of routine that had once been unremarkable and now felt like a luxury, passing through a checkpoint without being questioned, followed, or detained. "Oh my God!" The voice came from behind her. A woman, maybe 40, with a girl beside her who looked about 12. The girl was wearing a black t-shirt with a familiar logo. The Bellator crest, gold on black, the letters sharp and angular. "You're Simone Grayfield." The woman was not whispering. My daughter. She watches all your fights. We saw the news. What happened to you was… are you okay? Simone turned. The girl was staring at her with the wide-eyed intensity of a child who had just seen something from a screen become real. Her mother had a hand on her shoulder. Protective, excited, unsure of the protocol for approaching someone who had been on the news for months. I'm fine, thank you for asking. Would it be too much to ask for an autograph? She's been doing jiu-jitsu for 2 years. You're her hero. Simone looked at the girl. 12 years old, brown skin, braids pulled back tight, standing in an airport wearing the shirt of a fighting promotion because somewhere, on some screen, she had seen a woman who looked like her do something extraordinary. Simone smiled, the first real smile in 4 months. Of course. She signed the girl's shirt with a Sharpie the mother produced from her purse. The girl grinned so wide it looked like her face might split. Then she said quietly, almost too quiet to hear over the airport noise, "Did you really take him down with a hip sweep?" "Oh Goshi variant. His weight did most of the work." The girl nodded, as if this were the most important technical information she had ever received. Then she hugged Simone, sudden, fierce, the hug of a child who did not know how to express what she was feeling except through contact. Simone hugged her back, briefly, carefully, then released. "Keep training," she said. "I will." The line moved. The family stepped forward. Simone adjusted her bag and turned back to the security checkpoint. Her phone buzzed. Text from Voss. Pryor's bodycam IT logs. Full analysis in. The activation delay was a manual remote pause. Initiated at 7:41:04. Resumed at 7:43:08. Command authorization, supervisor level. Credential set SPD-SUP-019. Court order filed for credential identification. Hearing March 12. She read the message twice. Credential set SPD-SUP-019. A number. Attached to a person who had sat somewhere, in an office, in a patrol car, at a desktop terminal, and pressed a button that paused an officer's body cam during the most critical 2 minutes of an encounter that would determine whether a woman went to prison or went free. Someone had pressed that button knowing what it would hide, knowing what it would allow, knowing that 2 minutes of silence was all it took to reshape a truth into a lie. Pryor was one officer, Underhill was one detective. Stelling was one captain, but SPD-SUP-019 was a system, a credential, a protocol, a capability that existed because someone had built it, approved it, and used it. Not once. Maybe not just this once. The question was not just who had pressed the button. The question was how many times the button had been pressed before. How many other cases? How many other people? How many other Simones who did not have a security camera on a nearby building and a public defender stubborn enough to keep filing motions? She tucked the phone into her jacket pocket, moved through the security scanner, collected her bag on the other side, walked to gate B7, found her window seat, and buckled in. The plane pushed back from the gate, taxied, lifted. The Arizona desert spread out below, brown and gold and endless, cut by the dark threads of highways and the silver flash of the Salt River. Scottsdale was down there somewhere, shrinking. The corner of Goldwater and 2nd, the boutique with the hand-lettered sign, the Loomis building with its camera, the precinct where they had fingerprinted her and photographed her and put her in a cell for defending her own life. All of it shrinking, all of it still there. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The captain announced cruising altitude. The woman across the aisle opened a magazine. The man in front of her reclined his seat. Simone stared out the window. The desert disappeared into clouds. The sky turned from blue to white to the formless gray of altitude, where the earth below became an abstraction, and everything that had happened on its surface seemed both permanent and impossibly small. Her phone was in her pocket. The text from Voss was on the screen. SPD-SUP-019. A number that meant a name, that meant a person, that meant a decision, that meant a system. The case was closed. Her name was cleared. The charges were dismissed with prejudice. But somewhere in the Scottsdale Police Department's server room, a supervisor's access code sat in a log file that nobody had examined until now. Nobody except Garrett Innes. Nobody except Voss. Nobody except a judge who had agreed to unseal it. And now, nobody except Simone. She closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. If this story left you with chills, hit that like button and subscribe, because the system never stops, and neither do we. See you in the next one.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.